Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. That's Trevor Trowbridge. I'm Brian Driscoll, and man, I am excited. Whew, man, we get to talk some more Notre Dame football today, Trev. That's, you wake up today, be like, man, God still loves me. My wife still loves me, and we get to talk about Notre Dame football. It is going to be a good day. There's no doubt about it. And so the snow that I saw this morning when I woke up didn't bother me maybe as much as it normally would. But man, Trev, I'm ready to talk some Notre Dame football today, man. I know you're ready to talk football today. Here's what we're going to have. Here's what we have on the docket. So we're going to start off with. We talked about this yesterday. We were going to talk about it yesterday. Well, I told you all yesterday we're going to talk about today. We were going to talk about Marcus Freeman's comments during the press conference, but the show went, with the BISA hold and then the practice rundown. It went really long, and I thought it'd be better served to make it its own subject today. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, Trev. We're going to just run through a bunch of different comments that Marcus Freeman made. Some of them are just kind of newsworthy, like, hey, here's what's going on with this guy. And then the others are going to be sort of, okay, here's what he said. What do we think about it? What are we reading into that? What are our thoughts on it? And then we'll get into part two of the show. And part two of the show is going to talk more specifically about the quarterback battle, Trev, and some comments he made about the quarterback battle regarding timeline and the answer that he had to me, where I asked him about, what's the challenge of building an offense around your talent when you don't know who your quarterback is going to be? I was kind of hoping he would have answered the same way he did, and he did. So, but we'll talk about it. And then the other thing too, Trev, is we're going to kind of talk a little bit about yesterday's practice, and just because I had a little bit of a reaction to yesterday's practice, and it was kind of like, dude, this is totally a hot take, but it's not. And I'll explain why, what that is, and my feeling about, does it really matter who starts at quarterback? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, why, how, all that'll be part two. And then part three, Trev, daily mailbag. So if you guys have some questions, go ahead and get those in there now. We have a super chat in there already. We have a question from Andrew Gilmore about, potentially trying Selvin Absher out at center. So if you guys want to get some questions in there today, at the end of our two segments, we'll answer whatever questions you guys have until we're done or until we get to an hour, whichever comes first. And so we're going to have some fun with that today. But end of the day, Trev, man, day after, the excitement of being at your first Notre Dame practice wear off, or are you still pretty fired up? Or do you just kind of stay fired up during spring ball?
Look, man, I'm one of those people that I'm kind of just consistently fired up all the time, especially when it comes to talking about Notre Dame football. So I've already kind of ripped through my contact list and told everybody that, that I'm close with and knows me and knows how much I love Notre Dame, where I was at yesterday. So it was a lot of fun. That's for sure. But for me, I'm ready to talk about it a little bit more, dive into it, break it down, what some of the things mean, what Marcus Freeman's press conference means. That's another thing for me that I'm still kind of giddy about. I love going to those press conferences. It's cool, not just watching it on my TV, but getting to sit there in person and hear everything. So
they handed me the mic, and Trev kept trying to take it out of my hand. I was like, come on, man, it's my question, man. No, it didn't really happen. But he was thinking it. But no, it's we're going to go through some different things he talked about today, Trev. And just first one is a little bit newsworthy, and it kind of perked my attention when he was talking about Jalen Stroman. He was asked a question about the transfers. I think it was Tim Priester asked him a question about sort of the up the middle transfers, Dawson and then Devontae Smith and Jalen Stroman. And he talked about, obviously he talked a lot about his relationship with Devontae Smith, which we've talked about on the show, the fact that they recruited him out of high school when he was still at Cincinnati, which just kind of shows, how, think about that. Like, it was as an underclassman, but like that was 2021, 21 is when he came to Notre Dame. Devontae Smith's a fifth-year senior. His first year of college was 2021, but he recruited him as underclassman. He went from Cincinnati D coordinator to Notre Dame head football, like fourth year of being the Notre Dame head football coach in a pretty quick period of time. But he talked about that. But then he made a comment. So the reason Jalen Stroman is out for the spring is not because the injury he had at Virginia Tech directly. I mean, it's indirectly related to it, meaning it's not just part of the rehab process. He said they had to go in and clean something up when he got here, which was a little bit concerning for me, Trev, because we heard about this with Riley Leonard last year, where he got here and he had to clean something up. And that, I'll be honest with you, Trev, when you talk about a football player in anything up here, and I believe it was a clavicle is what he had. I'll be honest, I get a little bit nervous about a guy that has to tackle someone and play a physical sport when you're talking about you had a shoulder injury that needed another procedure done, even if it was just a minor one. That was a bit concerning for me. And not that I'm questioning whether or not Jalen Stroman is going to be available for the fall, but it does, I think, put a lot more pressure on the rest of that depth chart to step up, because if for some reason he can't go or gets hurt again, you're going to really need to depend on that depth chart to really step up and perform.
It raises a couple different questions for me, if I'm being 100% honest. One, what happened along, because you start to think about the process, right? And the process of coming back from injury. Was he being told to do the right things by the school that he was coming from? And let me disclaimer here, this isn't a shot at anyone specifically, not a shot at Virginia Tech, not a shot at Jalen Stroman. Sometimes it's just you want to dive into the process and what it looks like, somebody's journey back. Was it Virginia Tech directing him to maybe not do some of the more important things during rehab to make sure that he was able to come back? Was a little bit of it potentially on Jalen Stroman for, the letdown of you play in half of 3/4 of the home opener, and then unfortunately you get lost for the season. You have to battle a little bit of that. And then, of course, the points that Brian all brought up about now it's not just as simple as, well, replacing Xavier Watts on the depth chart, and in the starting lineup, they'll just slide in Jalen Stroman, who has a lot of experience. Notre Dame is gearing up to play what they are expecting, what we were all expecting to be another long 14 to 16 game season. Jalen Stroman's one of the guys that has yet to play 12 in a year. Some of those reasons outside of his control. But it all kind of begs the question of what kind of happened along in that process. So that's something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on a lot during the spring.
Or was it not part of the process, but maybe the original surgery wasn't performed correctly? Or it could also just be something as simple as his body just didn't heal right. I mean, that happens sometimes too. And so we don't know why he had to get it cleaned up. But the fact that it was cleaned up, to me, is a bit of a red flag, where if you're Mike Mickens and you're Chris Ash and you're the defensive staff, you better make sure that you have a thought of, I wouldn't even be thinking about Jalen Stroman right now. I just say, look, we're gonna build this depth chart like he's not even there. And then that's the pressure that's on Luke Talich and Bronte Johnson and Jadon Blair and Kennedy Urlacher and Tabor Armbeni Powell and all those type of guys, Ethan Long, all the guys that are on the depth chart this spring. Then when he comes back and proves himself, then he forces his way into the rotation. That's great. That's all fine and dandy. But you'll then still have it. You'll be in a position where you can kind of thrive should he not be able to go. So I don't want to speculate on why the cleanup needed to happen. There's so many different things that could cause that, Trev. And if it was something related to the Virginia Tech, the good news is that he's not there anymore, and it could taken care of by the Notre Dame doctors. Because the thing about Riley Leonard is, Riley had that 2 extra procedures when he got to Notre Dame because he was cleaning up what was done when he was coming from Duke. Once it was all healed up, he was able to play through a 16-game season. And that's great, right? So this could end up being nothing, but it does. I think you have to put even more emphasis on, like, for example, when you talk about some of the guys that aren't going to be participating this spring, and you think about, like, okay, you're not going to have Anthony Knapp. Let's say, or you're not going to have. I'm trying to think of some of the guys that aren't practicing this spring. Jordan Faison won't be there at certain practices. Let me just bring this up because I want to make sure you're not going to have Malachi Fields, for example, because he's not on campus yet. You're not going to have. Let me see. I'm pulling up the injury list that you put together, Trev, and gonna put it through here. Where's the? You typed it in. Actually, it's Chris Tarek. I always type him in as Christopher Tarek, so that's why it's not pulling up in my search function on the message board. But the point is that there's certain guys you're not going to have this spring, but you're kind of it's a different type of concern because they're going to be here. So you're not as concerned about the fact that you're not going to have Malachi Fields because you know why he's not here, and you know that he's going to end up being okay. You know that he's going to end up being a guy that you know that you know the role he's going to play. He's coming back from his own minor offseason surgery. You know, there's just different aspects of it that you look at and say, okay, they're going to be okay because they know what this guy can do. There's no injury. Once he gets back, he should be fine. There's just things that you can build around. The concern that I have for some of the guys that are out, Jordan Botelho's out. Ashton Craig is out. Cooper Flanagan is out. Boubacar's out. Like, the reality is like you kind of know what those guys can do because you've coached them before. You don't know about Jalen Stroman. But what you have to think about is with some of these guys is like, hey, you know these guys are going to be back, but you were in complete control of the process to get them back to being in good health, where you weren't with Jalen Stroman, which can be a little bit of a red flag. But for each and every one of those guys that's not here because of an injury, you have to go into spring practice, in my opinion, thinking we don't have that guy. Because what if there's another injury? What if he's not 100%? What if this? What if that? And I think that's what makes it a little bit different than, say, you don't have Malachi Fields, you don't have a Ty Washington, because those are guys that just aren't here yet. Just like there was a different level of concern for Rod Hurd and Bo Collins than maybe there was last spring for a Riley Leonard. Because with Bo and Rod, you knew they were healthy. They just were finishing up their degrees. There was no, with Riley, it was like, is he going to be okay? Is he going to be able to make it through a whole season? And that's the concern here. But it's even greater with a guy who hasn't played for you before. And that was something that popped in my head that kind of was like, that's worth talking about. He also was talking about Jordan Faison a little bit yesterday, and comments he made about Jordan Faison, Trev, I thought were interesting too. Somebody asked him, and I put this on the message board the week before fall camp. I'd said that I talked to a source that said that Jordan Faison was going to be more involved in the in spring practice than he was last year, where he was there, but he didn't really participate much. And I don't remember him ever having pads on. But Marcus Freeman did confirm that they have enhanced his plan. But he did say lacrosse is still his number one priority. And they're going to work with him because there's a lot of things to consider. Are you overworking him? Yeah, but even if he never misses a lacrosse practice, never misses a lacrosse game, but if he's doing all this football stuff, are you overworking him? Is his body going to break down? There's all those type of things that you have to make sure that you're also not only worried about overworking him for the fall, but overworking him for lacrosse season. But I did think it was interesting that Jordan Faison will be out there. And I think it says a little something about the competition at the wide receiver position too. But I also think it speaks to Jordan's commitment to also being a big-time football player. Because I know there was some frustration that he had last season, just about all the injuries and just some different things that he had to go through, because there was high hopes for him, and I know he had high expectations going into the season. And then, of course, first half of the first game, boom, your ankle goes down. So, man, I got to tell you, thinking about getting more of him, I think, is something that should help this quarterback room a little bit, Trav. That was the first thing that kind of popped in my head. But I think it does say something a little bit about the fact that Jordan's trying to ramp up his football activity this spring.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the commitment level of what Jordan Faison has to the football program while still balancing being a full-time lacrosse player in the spring. We've had a lot of questions about what is going to be Notre Dame's response to making it to the national championship game yet losing. And you see players who are really still focused and locked in. You have guys like Drake Bowen who elected to forego playing baseball, a sport that he loved playing, to remain with the Notre Dame football team in the spring. You have guys like Jordan Faison, who Marcus Freeman yesterday in the press conference mentioned that, hey, he's going to be around a little bit more this year opposed to last year. And I think some of that speaks to big picture. Some of that speaks to the team not being happy with the end result of last season. In a season that there was a lot to be satisfied with what happened. You had the 31-year Major Bowl win drought. You get the most wins in program history. rattled off 10 straight regular season wins. So there's a lot to hang your hat on. But I think big picture for me, my biggest takeaway from that is the guys that are in this locker room, the coaching staff that's in this locker room, everybody is still moving forward for the collective effort of bringing home the 12th national title to this team, to this school. And I think that's really cool that he's able to do that. And so it is a little bit, I don't want to call it concerning. It is something that I'm going to be keeping my eye on with Faison, with his ankle, not overworking yourself and doing both, because there will probably be days where it will be a football practice in the morning and then a lacrosse practice or a lacrosse game in the afternoon. Who knows what that looks like? But it's going to be about load management for him. But I think he's just a competitive kid that wants to do it. I also don't think it's a coincidence that a kid in the same class that he was in, and Drake Bowen, also elected to be with the program this spring, could have also been a little bit of a, hey, this junior class, soon to be junior class, is rising. They're going to be a really big heart and soul of this team. It's cool to see him around more, man. It's really cool to see him around. So those are kind of my biggest takeaways with Jordan Faison.
Next, I want to there was also a comment. He said Jabron Payne was good to go. Jeremiah Love was good to go. Neither one of those guys. I'd have to go look at Angela's photos from yesterday. I didn't notice Jabron Payne having a knee brace on, but before I say that, now that I think about it, I want to go back and look at Angela's photos from yesterday, because she had some photos of Jabron Payne. Jeremiah Love did not have a brace on yesterday. He was completely without that, so that was obviously a positive sign. But as I noted yesterday, Jabron Payne did look good going through drills, so that was good to see, get him back out there, because if the depth chart's going to shake out a certain way, you want it to be because everybody was healthy and everybody battled, and then made the best man win in that situation. So that was good to see, Trev. That was a note from practice yesterday. Next couple things, we're going to talk about his spring comments, Chris Ash and Mike Martin, before we get to the QB stuff. And I wanted to talk about his spring comments, and there's two aspects of it. And the first one is just kind of talking about really addressing the challenges of the new schedule, the new calendar for football because of the extended playoffs. And then after we talk about that, in his comments there, we'll then talk about what he said about why they're still going to do the spring game, and what exactly his comments about them having a spring game means, and what kind of spring game will it be. So let's talk about that, Trev. First and foremost, this is what Marcus Freeman said when he was talking about putting the spring calendar to schedule. And the question was about other programs canceling spring practice. And so he went on, he had kind of two different aspects he talked about. So he talked about why they moved it back the way they did, and I thought it was very insightful. And I'll explain why. His first comment was, we moved spring back. I think when I first put our spring practice calendar, it was last year sometime, and we decided when the spring game was going to be. So I decided after the season we had to move the start of spring practice back about 2 weeks. And the reality is I did not want to cheat the strength and conditioning phase of the development phase of our team. That was the first part of it. He continued, said, I think it's really important, and there was an integration of different guys based on the amount of plays they played last year in terms of when they started that strength conditioning phase. So that's why I decided to push it back 2 weeks to get started, and we will have a spring game. It will be a version of a spring game. We'll get into that next. But there's something interesting in that, Trev, because we said, I don't know how this offseason is going to be with the extended season. And he talked about coaches are creatures of habit. Marcus Freeman said in there, number one, we set our spring calendar a year ago with the expectation of where we're going to be. I wanted to kind of bust his chops a little bit and be like, so you didn't expect to be in the national championship game? Is that basically what you're telling us? But I didn't want to do that, because obviously that's not what you're thinking about. You're looking at like academic calendars and when we're going to have the blue gold game and all that kind of stuff. But then the reality of the season caused them to have to change it. And then you looked at, so that was phase one. You have to change your start date. Phase two was, okay, who's going to start when? And as we saw and have heard from different things, the freshmen and the early enrollees and some of the other guys that didn't play a lot started earlier than guys that played a bunch. And then you kind of start incorporating certain guys into the program based on how much they played. I thought that was very interesting. That's not just a Marcus Freeman decision. That's a Marcus Freeman. That's a Lauren Lando. That's a Rob Hunt. That's a John, was a Waggle. Is that what the Waggle? Is that what this guy's name is? They're all coming together on this. And I thought that's one of those unique challenges, Trev, that I think a lot of teams face. And is it a good decision? I don't know. We're going to find out how these guys play. But it does show that there's a lot of these programs like a Notre Dame, like an Ohio State, even Texas and Penn State to a degree, have to really think through how are we going to handle the offseason now based on the extended playoff. Because, again, you can't go into the summer. You can't go past your semester ending. Then you say, okay, but then you need to make sure you have enough rest between the end of your spring and the beginning of fall. So it was fascinating to kind of hear him talk about that, Trev, and just the challenges that went into the spring schedule they put together and just how much they're going to practice, how long they're going to practice. Yesterday's practice was an hour. That's it.
I think it was really insightful, and it helped me kind of paint the picture a little bit of what this new age of college football is going to look like with an expanded postseason. Because on one hand, you have to juggle the task of, look, rest and recovery is super important. Football's a violent sport. It's very physically demanding. Not that other sports aren't, but for obvious reasons, football is definitely up there. I'd make the argument it's at the top of the list. They also, there's been a common theme from a lot of the different press conferences that have gone on during the postseason about, and some of the offseason, about how important winter workouts are and how important it is that the players go through that off-season workout regime to get their bodies ready for it. And I like the fact that it was staggered a little bit. The players who might not have played as much, the incoming freshmen, the early enrollees, the mid-semester enrollees that were transfers that were able to make it over, the Jared Dawsons of the world, the Elijah Hughes, the Devontae Smiths of the world, they were able to come in and kind of hit the ground running, and they were able to start their winter workouts a couple weeks before while they were giving the Jaden Greathouses of the world, the Jeremiah Loves of the world, the Emil Wagners of the world, that rest, that much-needed rest from playing a long postseason. But they were able to push spring back long enough to where now everybody is now at that same level physically because they've now been rested. They've now gone through that offseason workout regime. That was really insightful for me because that is one of the new tasks of what's that going to look like for Notre Dame. We're going to have a lot of conversations continuing this offseason around what our expectation is for this Notre Dame football program based on the things that we've seen at practice, how the roster is getting put together. It's a fairly safe bet that Notre Dame is going to be playing 14, maybe 15 games season in and season out. So what is that going to look like for them? And that's something that was really insightful for me that helped paint that picture.
I also think that it presents a challenge for you moving forward because now how do you schedule your thing? Because here's the thing. It's not just like, okay, week before camp starts, we decide we're going to move it back a lot. There's so many logistical things to go into that. Meals go into that, equipment situation. Your equipment team has to have an idea of what's going on. Your strength conditioning coach has to know kind of what you're building to and all those type of things. So I think there's a lot of different factors at play for me, Trevor, as to why this is an intriguing thing. And we're not even learning something about Marcus Freeman in this regard from the standpoint of like this is what I wanted him to do, and I'm glad he sent, because I don't have a clue what to do. I was never in this situation. Because like at the Division III level, I mean, we played 10 games. And like I remember when I was in Muhlenberg, I remember this because we played our second playoff game the Saturday after Thanksgiving. We had to play 5 games to win a championship in the postseason. But we only played 10, and then so by the time, and it was a week after the season is over, you're going right into the playoffs. So they're over like in December. It's different for these guys because they're playing longer regular seasons. There's that big gap in between the end of the regular season and the playoffs. Now there's the extra rounds of the playoffs. So it's not something I have an easy answer for. And I don't know if what they're doing is going to work or not. It's just fascinating to kind of see the things that had to go into their decisions. And how will we know if it worked or not? Let's go watch how this season plays out. Not so much from a wins and losses standpoint, but from a fatigue standpoint, an injury standpoint. Are they having another year of a lot of injuries? Do they wear down late in games more? Do they wear down in November more? All those things will tell him and that group and us if the plan they had was effective. But it makes a lot of sense to me I'd have no issue with what he said. It's like, okay, this is going to be interesting. And I'm also curious when those extra 5 practices are going to be. Are they going to be after the Blue Gold game? What kind of practices will they be? And I haven't got some really clear answers on that yet. So I'm also curious to see how that kind of plays out. But I was told they are going to have 15 practices. That's all that I was told. So I'm trying to find out a little bit more about that. Second part of what he said about the spring, I thought was something that is more worth talking about because it is something that I kind of have gone on multiple rants about this offseason. And this is encouraging to hear, especially if he keeps this. Like what I'm about to read, I hope there's never a time that I have to raise my hand and ask Marcus Freeman, well, you said this before. Why are you now not doing that? I hope that never comes, but this is what he said. He said, so it will be a version of a spring game. Keep that in mind, Trev, when we talk about that after this next part. Again, it's important to me to use that as an opportunity. That's obviously first team. 1, to let our players perform in front of our fans. But 2, it's a chance to really integrate our community and our fans with this football program. This is where I was like, okay, yes. Like you saw me, Trev, like in the back. I was like, I think that's so important to me is to give the opportunity to fans that maybe typically don't get the opportunity to come up to a Notre Dame game, or if they do, to give them another opportunity to come and engage with our players. I don't want to take away that. I don't want to take that away. Or I don't want to take away from that. Excuse me. There's a lot of pros and cons for each decision, but that went into my decision of keeping our spring game was I want to use this opportunity for our team and our football program to make sure that we are really interacting with our fans. That was the thing that made me the most happy to hear from Marcus Freeman yesterday. And I hope that is something that continues for a long time. Because here's the reality. Do you want to know what college football will look like if it wasn't like everybody says, well, fans aren't part of it. Yes, they are. The fact that you're going to school for free is because of fans. The fact that you get all this free gear is because of fans. The fact that you have an NIL deal that's paying you 6 figures, 7 figures is because of fans. Because you know who's not getting $1 million contracts for NIL? Division III players. You know who's not going to school for free? Division III players. Do you know why they're in Division III? Not because those schools are raking in money for football. They just don't get them. They're not making enough money on that. Most of them are very small schools. But Notre Dame's not a very big school. Rice isn't a very big school. Wake Forest isn't a very big school. You're getting this because of the TV money. You're getting this because of attendance, because people are paying hundreds of dollars. You know who doesn't pay hundreds of dollars to come to games? And pay $300 a night for hotel and Division III fans, 1AA fans. That's why, those kids aren't not getting certain contracts because, well, you're at the FCS level. You're not allowed to do that. You're at the Division III level. You're not allowed to do that. No, it's because nobody cares about that outside of the little local alums and the parents of the players. I mean, at the Division III level, we played in front of 8, 9, 10,000 fans. You're like, holy moly, this is crazy. And the reality is you have all of this not because of anything that Notre Dame has done in regard to, look, Notre Dame did this, this, and this, and that's why they're getting in, tens of millions. It's Notre Dame did all these things, became a very popular team amongst fans, and then that ramped up the revenue that's coming into the program. Because if Notre Dame only had 3,000 people coming to their games every week and they weren't on TV, or they were on TV but nobody watched, or the same amount of people watched that maybe watched like the Division III semifinals or the Division III national championship game, then guess what? They're not giving away free scholarships. There's no NIL deals that are coming. That all is because of the fan interest in the sport. And there's way too many decision makers at ESPN, at CBS, at Fox, at the NCAA, in the College Football Playoff Committee, in school presidents, athletic directors, and head football coaches who somehow now think that the fans don't matter to this process. We don't have to think about what's good for the fans in our decision-making process. So it was an incredible breath of fresh air yesterday to hear Marcus Freeman say, hey, this is good for our team and our fans, and that bond still matters. But then also to say, hey, look, some people don't have an opportunity to come to those games. Now, he can't go on the same kind of rant even if he believed, and I don't know if he does, even if he believed it's way too expensive. Like, even if he believed, like, listen, if I was just Marcus Freeman, the staff writer for Irish Breakdown, or the owner of Irish Breakdown, or if I was just Marcus Freeman, the manager of the local Domino's, if I was just Marcus Freeman, the FedEx driver, if I was just Marcus Freeman, unless you're like a doctor, a lawyer, something like that, or a Division I college football coach, dude, I got 6 kids and a wife. Think about how much it would cost me to take my family to a Notre Dame game. I don't know if he thinks about those things. But even if he did, he can't say that. But it was nice for him to at least acknowledge, hey, look, not every fan can come to our game. Sometimes it's just because you wanted to come, you can afford to come, but there's no tickets available. There's all types of reasons why fans can't come. And so it was great for me to hear, and I was really happy to hear him talk about that desire to, the players getting to play in front of fans matters. You really want the first time your freshman quarterback has ever played in front of thousands of fans is on the road against Miami? It won't be a freshman, but you get the point that I'm making, right? It's like, you want the first time your freshman quarterback is going to play in front of tens of thousands of people is on the road, or your first game of the year at home in Notre Dame Stadium. Like, is it the same? Is playing at Miami the same as playing in the Blue Gold game? No. But it's just like practice isn't the same as playing at Miami, but it's something that prepares you for it. Playing in this type of environment prepares you because now you do have eyes watching you. You throw an interception, it's not just you and your teammates that know you threw an interception. Here's the reality. Some of your teammates don't know you threw an interception because they're over there doing something different. So it's the first time we're like, dude, what I do is going to get cheered or jeered by thousands of people and millions watching at home. That's when you start to say, okay, like, hey, man, this guy stepped up in this moment, and that was pretty good stuff. Like, if you have a quarterback that rips it up all spring, and he goes out there in the spring game and is just nervous, and he's rushing everything, and he doesn't play well, and the crowd's affecting him, now you know. Because now you know kind of, okay, what I got to work on with this kid, but then also you got to know, like, hey, this kid may not be that kind of money type of guy. When things were even a little bit live, he kind of folded a little bit and didn't do things he was taught. So we either A, we got to know that and work on that this offseason, and also B, that may be something that factors into our decision at the end of the day, where maybe this other kid, he was solid during the spring, but man, the Blue Gold game and the Jersey scrimmage, when it was like live and it mattered, and especially in the Blue Gold game where there were 30,000 people in the stands, that kid stepped up and was just loose and calm and getting the ball out and doing this, doing that, and man, he was dealing. That's one of those things that could end up being a difference maker for you when you're going out to make a decision. And it's not just quarterback that's true for. That's true for all positions. This kid hasn't dropped the ball all year. He gets out in front of 30,000 people. He drops 4 balls during warm-ups, drops 2 balls in the game, and he was shook. That's going to tell me something. How's he going to be playing at Miami? So I think that it's great to recognize the value in that, even if it's not a full-on game, which we'll talk about in a second. I think that matters. But the other part too, Trev, about the opportunity for the fans, I truly hope this never goes away for Marcus Freeman, and I hope that Pete Bavacqua also understands that this fan base loves you, your program, and everything about you. And the less access you provide, the people that suffer the most are those fans. Like, think of the first practice. We get like 4 minutes of individual drill, 3 minutes of video. There's not a whole lot you can see. And then Notre Dame comes out with this little 15-second video where you don't see a single whole play go down. Like, what are fans really getting out of that? It's nice, but now we don't get another availability to next Wednesday, and then we don't get another availability to the following Saturday. We get 3 out of the 14 practices we get access to. Now, it's not so much about, yes, it makes it harder for us to do our jobs, but you're also limiting the fans' ability to hear more and be excited and do all that with the fan base. And then you're going to also take away the spring game at some of these places. Like, really? Like Florida State, they're already not having a spring game. It's because of the construction at the stadium, which is bullcrap, because Notre Dame had a blue gold game on their practice facilities when they were renovating their stadium. You remember that, Trev? I think it was like 2013 or 2014 when Notre Dame was in the process of building up the Crossroads project. They had a spring game. They brought in stands to put around the practice field. They paid money to bring in stands for people to sit and attend the spring game. So I don't want to hear like, oh no, blah, blah. It's bull crap. If you wanted a spring game, you could have a spring game. I've been to Florida State's campus. Believe me, you could have 4,000 or 5,000 people show up to that if you wanted to. But then now they're not letting media come to any of the practices. The only people that hurts is fans. It doesn't hurt media because now they can just write as many clickbait articles as they want and spread whatever. I mean, hey, look, they're going to get their intel. They're going to talk to people, but now I can just say whatever I want. And so, but you're not hurting them. They'll figure out a way to get their clicks. You're hurting the fans now. And so there's way too many coaches that don't understand that. Or they do, and they just don't care. So to hear Marcus Freeman talk about, this isn't just about my team. This is about this community, this fan base. I think it's just another one of the reasons why Marcus Freeman is a very beloved figure amongst Notre Dame fans. I just hope that never goes away. And I hope if other people are trying to make it go away, he's willing to fight for it, because it is a great opportunity for his team to compete. Again, is the blue gold game an end all be all? No, it's not. But any chance you have to play in front of that many people, you are going to learn something about your team that you can't learn in a closed off scrimmage. You just can't. Because I don't care what anybody says, there's a whole different mindset that goes into practicing football when it's just your team and, maybe a couple of recruits on the sideline and the training staff and the managers and the ball boys, and you have some refs come. That's a whole different animal than when you're playing out in front of 30, 40, 50,000 people, and in some places 100,000 people. And you can't tell me there's not value in learning who steps up in that environment as a football team. You can't tell me that. But it also means a lot to those fans. And as I've said before, I know a lot of fans who only come to spring games because it's the only game they can afford. And for most of my life, that's all I could have afforded too. And that might have been the thing that brought the biggest smile out of me, is like, I hope he never loses that. I hope he never loses that, because there are a lot of programs right now cheating their fans. And now they do it because they know they can get away with it. But I don't want to push that envelope to the point where maybe someday we find out maybe they're not going to come back. Major League Baseball, in my opinion, has never been the same since the World Series strike. Just got dropped by ESPN because they weren't willing to pay the money they want to pay him. So I hope that never happens to college football. And for at least one more year, it's not going to happen to Notre Dame. And I love the fact that that Marcus Freeman made that comment. And I hope he never forgets that, no matter how much success this program has. I hope he never forgets that. So that's my rant, Trev. I was excited to hear that. Just want to kind of get your thoughts. And I know you had a different take on, not a different take on that, but you had something else that stuck out to you during that conversation as well. But just overall, what were your thoughts on that? Just if you weren't working for me and you were just a fan sitting at home, what would that have meant to you? Or maybe it wouldn't have. I truly want to hear your honest opinion on that.
Yeah, I think it gives you a lot of reassurance. It gives me a lot of reassurance that one of the top priorities at Notre Dame, one of the things that makes Notre Dame unique in such a special place, are the fans that come in and fill your seats and that watch you every Saturday. You don't get one of the biggest fan bases in all of college football by accident. And it's by supporting and giving back to that community that makes you as such. And I'm glad that that's still a top priority that Marcus Freeman has. Truly. And I'm not saying that, Florida State and Nebraska don't have great fans, but
They do, which is why it sucks.
Yep.
That's my point. That's why it sucks. Nebraska has a great fan base, and they're cheating them out of another opportunity to see that football team play.
And I'm glad that Notre Dame isn't following suit right now into what other programs are doing across the country. It gives me a lot of hope for the future of this program and what the offseason truly means. Because for somebody like me, even before I was in this chair, before I had the opportunity to go to practices, that's what I look forward to. I'm sure people in the chat can back this up. It's like I looked forward to seeing the clips that got put out online. I looked forward to reading the different articles and watching the different shows. I'm like, all right, how'd the boys look at practice today? Little things like that matter to just the everyday fan. As corny as it sounds, it helps you get through the workday. It gives you something to look forward to. Kind of scratches that itch a little bit of like, man, I'm going on almost 2 months now of not watching Notre Dame football on the weekends. And that going to the blue gold game. And everybody, I have some friends that they're not big college football fans. Like, oh, you're going to go watch a practice. It's like, bet I am. Because that's what I get. That's what I get until August 31st. Yes. What else do you want me to do? There's only so many replays of games where I already know the outcome that I can sit down and watch. I need to see something where I don't know what the outcome is. I need to see something new, and that's what that is for me. And I still have a little bit of that because at the end of the day, I am still a Notre Dame fan. It made me really happy to hear what Marcus Freeman had to say yesterday. The one thing that I am interested to see how it's played out, not in a good way or a bad way. It's literally just I'm interested to see how it goes. Is he said there will be, quote, a version of a spring game. Now,
this is what he said. I want to read it. So he said that's what he was finishing up the portion of why they moved spring. He says, so that's why I decided to push it back 2 weeks to get started, and we will have a spring game. And then he says it will be a version of a spring game. That's what you're referring to.
Yep. And I'm not saying this is a good or a bad thing. I am just genuinely curious of what that's going to look like. I hope, and this is just a personal preference, I hope that it doesn't turn into some Pro Bowl type of BS where it's like, all right, there's going to be a throws challenge,
skills
and then there's going to be a skills competition, and then we're going to watch the wide receivers and the DBs play dodgeball because that's literally what the Pro Bowl is now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that it is still some form of a game and some form of a scrimmage, maybe not for the entire 2.5 hours people are in that stadium, but maybe it is just watching somebody watching this team go through a full-length practice. I don't know what that looks like.
Yes.
But maybe that's what it is. The fans get to see an indie period, an inside run period, a 7-on-7 period. And then for the final, call it 45 minutes to an hour, they go and they watch a live scrimmage where you get to see some of the best on best stuff. You get to see some of the new players that outlets like you and I sit down and talk about. We're excited to see them in the spring. Maybe it's something like that versus like we're running out of the tunnel, the blue team's on one sideline, the gold team's on the other sideline. As long as they keep some form of that and it's not some just we're having a skills challenge day. But also, with that being said, if they did move it to that model, thinking of it from the fan lens that I will still have, I also would just like to be in that stadium. I mean, we saw how much traction.
That wouldn't mean as much though to me. Like, lane. I don't think as many people. Yeah, I don't think that would mean as much. The skills competition type of thing. Yeah, I agree.
Agreed. Yeah, no, it wouldn't mean as much. But I'd still go because I would still appreciate paying $15 to be inside of that stadium.
I think that would get old after a while. That type of thing would get kind of old. Because the other thing is kind of like, why do I not care about the NBA skills competition or the NFL or the NBA All-Star game or what the NFL has done? Because it's not football to me. Like that's just like I'm watching you like do stuff that people do in like their backyard. Like I don't really care about that. What I would be totally fine with and would actually be kind of cool would be to have now again, spring game is what I prefer. That is my preference. But if you get to the point in time where like, listen, we don't have the bodies for this. We don't have enough guys for a 2 deep offensive line. We're down to 105 scholarships now. That factors in, which means we can't bring in as many certain walk-ons or this, because when the new guys arrive, we may not have the depth chart. We may have some guys that are out. Because of the long season, we're resting guys. There's all types of different things that could leave you in a situation. I mean, we've seen with Notre Dame before, Trev, where they've had to have offensive lines that were just, they wore green jerseys because they had to go both ways because they were just thin on the offensive line. There may be years where that's true. And if they were to say, hey, listen, because of, we just won a national championship and our season was long and grueling and we're going to be here. Here's what we're going to do for our blue gold game. Blue gold day. You can call it that. It's your, maybe it's your second to last practice. Maybe it's practice 13 or 14. Maybe it's practice 10. Maybe it's the jersey scrimmage. But say, hey, listen, this is our blue gold day. And we're going to practice in the stadium. So fans can come. It's the same type of thing. We have concessions, all this stuff. And it's going to be just a normal, like a longer practice where they come out and they go through stretch. They go through their special teams drills. Maybe on this particular day, you do all your special teams, so they can kind of get work in front of the fans, things like that. Maybe you then go to your individual drills so people can watch guys coach. They can watch guys interact with their players. They can watch all the players get reps doing this and just running around and evaluating guys the same way that we do during practice. Then what does a normal practice look like? One-on-one competition. Receivers versus DBs. Tight ends versus DBs. Backs versus DBs on one side. And on the other side, one-on-ones, O-line, D-line. Just like a normal practice. And then after that, you do some other thing. You have another special teams. You do your PAT field goal. Then after that, it's inside run. And then with the offensive line and the defense, they're doing inside run. Maybe they're doing goal line, whatever. And then we're doing our half field reads or we're doing our 7-on-7. Right? I'm a big fan of 7-on-7. I think there's a lot of value to 7-on-7 if it's done the right way. In a practice setting, I've told you my issues with, I'm talking about in a practice setting. And then you get to watch it. You get to watch CJ take his reps. You get to watch Kenny take his reps and Steve take his reps and all the receivers take their reps. And then maybe in this type of format, you'd go longer than you normally would in a practice, or maybe it's only like a 10-minute period in a practice. Maybe you do it for 20. And then you have another individual session. And then at the end, you have a scrimmage where it's more of a full-on type of live Saturday, scrimmage. You have good on good, 2s on 2s, 3s on 3s, all that type of stuff. And have it be a little bit of a longer format to where you just had a practice. And I think fans would – I'm curious what you guys would think. What would you guys think if Notre Dame decided, hey, we're not going to have a blue gold game for whatever legitimate reasons, but we're going to have this thing. You can come to it. You can tailgate for it. It's going to be on a Saturday. It's going to be a blue gold game. We're going to have it. We're going to have it on Peacock. We're going to have concessions. It's going to be a blast. And then afterwards, we're going to have, for people who want to pay a little extra, we're going to have sort of a meet and greet with the players afterwards, something like that. But the main attraction is you get to sit in the stands and watch Notre Dame go through a full practice. It's a bit of an extended practice because you're going to maybe do a little bit extra 7-on-7 and a little bit extra team, a little bit extra one-on-ones. But to see that kind of competition, would you enjoy that? Would you pay for that? Would that be something that would be if blue and gold game is not an option, would you be willing to do that? Would you be willing to pay for that? Would you tailgate for that? I would, but that's also because I'm a former coach and I know how much more I'm learning about this team than I necessarily would be watching a blue gold game. Because you got to have that practice anyway, Trev. Now you're just saying instead of that, we're doing this. That's my 2 cents. What would you think about that, Trev? And then people in the chat that are actually paying attention to the show, I'd be curious what you guys would think about that as well.
No, I think it's a really good idea. I think that I think it's unrealistic. And I say this after talking to some of my friends and people that I've brought to the blue gold game before, things like that. Now, I think that doing more things to cater to a little bit more of a casual fan would be beneficial because it's unrealistic to think that every single person that goes in attendance for the blue gold game is going to watch things exactly how I sit down and watch it. I can sit down and I can find things to watch, whether it's a practice like you were talking about, the full blue gold game, different things like that. But I think giving fans the opportunity to pay a little extra, you go down, you talk about like interacting with some of the players, getting to talk to some of the coaches. I think that's huge. But at the end of the day, I think a reason why a lot of people like the blue gold game is for the simple fact that you can go, it's on a Saturday. It kind of breaks up the monotonous offseason. You get to sit down and tailgate. Ideally, it's nice weather. You get to be inside of the stadium. You go get a hot dog and a Diet Coke at the concession stand. You get to sit down and see what's in there. And I think that is the majority of the fans that go see it, which is why it's so important that they need to continue to have it. But I think it'd be extremely beneficial if they're going to go away from just the traditional, team blue versus team gold and things like that. If that's going to be the option, I think that's what would be beneficial.
Yeah, and I would like that to be an occasional option, not necessarily every year. But there are seasons and there are years where a blue gold game just doesn't make a lot of sense. Like I remember the last time they had to do the O-line was playing both ways. I remember and you had that year where Drew Pine. I felt so bad for Drew. He had to basically be quarterback for both teams. You remember that? He had to run down, does this thing over there. Then he's got to run down over here and go handle this team. And he's like playing with different. And it's like, dude, this is silly. We don't need, like, this is just, we're not getting a whole lot. The team is not getting a whole lot out of this, and that's kind of how I look at it, Trev, is there are times when I completely get not having a spring game in it, because you're almost kind of like wasting a practice opportunity in that situation. You're not actually getting a lot out of that. Whereas having just a real, maybe extended practice with individual and special teams and one-on-ones and 7-on-7, that's way more conducive, because I only need 2 quarterbacks to do 7-on-7. I only need 2 quarterbacks if we're going against the defense. I don't need 4 quarterbacks in that scenario. And that's kind of how I look at it, Trev, in certain seasons. Because I think if it comes after like a long, successful season, I think fans would understand. Cancel your spring game to go 2-10, you might be an idiot. Cancel 100%. Your season, cancel your spring game after you just went 7-6 like USC, or choked your season away like Nebraska did. That may not be the smartest move that you want to make. Yeah. But if Marcus Freeman was like, hey, guys, listen, we played a 16-game season, first time ever. We're a young team. We're this, we're that. We don't have the bodies to give you guys a real good look. So here's what we're going to do. This is what our blue gold game is going to look like. And is what I would love that. As opposed to watching Drew Pine have to run freaking back and forth from team to team, or watching an O-line protect on this guy, and then they got to go right back out there. You're taking your least conditioned players and making them have to go on play both sides of them, for both teams. I'm not getting a lot of value. And then you got a 15-minute running clock in the second half, which I support, by the way, because it's a lot of football for a one team, and so who's not even full strength, because guys are going to be out. Guys, that you aren't getting not all your freshmen are there, not all your transfers are there. Just a different animal. I think that'd be a lot of fun, and much, much better than a skills competition. Because here's the deal: you get 15 opportunities to practice, and it blows my mind how many coaches are willing to throw some of those away. Sometimes they just don't have all 15, or they have a walkthrough or whatever. I'm like, dude, this is a great time to prepare. This is a great time to get work in. Why would you want to waste that by having a skills competition? No, I don't think that's making you better. This type of thing, I think, would. So, but at the end of the day, the whole point of it, Trev, is you're trying to give back to the fan base. Like, how much money would Marcus Freeman be making right now at Notre Dame if Division I football teams had the same size of fan bases as Division III football teams? He'd be making the same decisions that I had to make, which is, this isn't worth it. I need to do something else. And that's my whole thing, is you've got to make different decisions than high school coaches make or D3 coaches make, because everything you do is dependent upon having a fan base that's big and excited. And like, why do some D1 teams, why are they not able to compete with those big boys? Why don't they have as much money? What's the reason for that? Their fan base isn't very big or engaged. Why is the ACC not as financially profitable as the Big Ten and the SEC? Because the fan base just it's not a big football fan base. It's more basketball fan base. Basketball doesn't sell. So there's just a whole lot of reasons why making sure that you don't forget how important the fans are to this whole thing matters. And I love the fact that Marcus Freeman said what he said. I give him a lot of credit for that, Trev. A lot of credit for that. And I just hope there's never a day where I'm like, well, you don't care about fans anymore? You know what I mean? And that's why I say I'm open to the reality that you can't always just play a game. You can't. But you know, there's something you can do like that I think would be awesome, and I hope that they continue to do that. All right, Trevor, that's going to do it for part 1 of today's show. We're going to get to part 2 next, where we're going to talk about the quarterback position. That's always a fun topic for a guy that played quarterback and a guy that played quarterback, and of course for a program where quarterback is kind of a big deal. So we're going to get to that next, folks. But before we do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5. Greatly appreciate you giving us a 5-star review. And I know you guys hear this over and over again every day, but there's a reason we say it. All these things help our channel. And they're all things you can do for free that none of those things takes more than a couple minutes of your time. Giving us a 5-star review helps our channel grow. Liking the shows helps our channel go. The more you like the shows, the more the people that watch. We have 4,000 or 5,000 people watch a show. If all of them actually hit the like button, that's going to help our channel grow. The algorithm will say, hey, look, this is a channel we got to get in front of more people that do searches for college football or Notre Dame or whatever the case may be. This stuff does help us. Subscribing to the channel helps us, and it doesn't cost you a thing. So if you actually like our channel, support our channel, when we ask you to do those things, we would really appreciate it, because it does actually help us. Because some people, Trev, aren't in a position where they can pay to be part of a message board. There's times in my life I know it's only $4.99 a month, but well, you just got to give up one Big Mac. Well, I don't have that one Big Mac, because I get all my money goes to make sure I keep a roof over my head. I totally understand that. If you want to support us, but you can't do so financially directly, this is a great way to help us out. So make sure you hit that like button. If you're listening via podcast platform, give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate that. But if you are able and willing, the best way to support us directly financially is to sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So Trevor Trowbridge, my man, part 2 of today's show, we are going to talk some quarterback at Notre Dame. And the premise of today's show, we're going to talk, first of all, we're going to begin by talking about some of the comments that Marcus Freeman made yesterday about the quarterback position and the timeline, and then his answer to what I said. I want to continue, kind of not parsing what he said, but just reacting to what he said. And then the second part will be getting into sort of our thoughts on the position. And as we said earlier, does it really matter who starts? Why not? And have some fun with that. So the first thing, Trev, is we're going to talk about the timeline that aspect of it, and so in sort of the structure of it. So this is a comment that Marcus Freeman was asked early in yesterday's press conference, and he said, I don't know if there's a perfect science that I'm going to be able to tell you right now that exactly what we're going to do, but the general theme of it is that they're all going to get reps with the ones. They're all going to get reps that we split. I'm talking Kenny, Steve, and CJ. They're going to split reps, and each day could be different. But it's important for us to communicate with them beforehand, and no matter if they like what group they're going with or not, which it shouldn't matter, that we're upfront and honest with them, and then we give them feedback after each practice, and we'll name a starter when a starter clearly shows that he's the best quarterback. I don't want to put it. This is the timeline part. I don't want to put a timetable on, and I refuse to do that. To me, if you don't have a decision made by then, it's going to frustrate you, and there's no need to put a timetable on it. You let those guys compete, and when a starter is determined, we're going to announce it. But again, I'm excited. I truly love competition. I think it's going to make all the 3 of those guys better. If it is the first true competition with 3 guys that I've been a part of, some we've talked about, but I think it's going to be a fair competition. I know it's going to be a fair competition. I'm really excited for it and looking forward to seeing how everyone in that room enhances, but also at some point, somebody's going to be named a starter. So first takeaway from that, Trev, obviously Marcus Freeman confirms it's going to be a little bit different than last year where it was kind of the hierarchy was already established. It was Steve, CJ, or Steve, Kenny. I'll eventually get it right. Steve, Kenny, CJ. We didn't see CJ get a whole lot of chances with the twos or the ones. We didn't see Kenny get a whole lot of chances with the ones. This year, as he said, first real three-man competition we've had. I would argue it's the first competition he's had, period. But I think you can make a case that Tyler Buckner did have a chance to beat out Sam Hartman. If he actually outperformed him, he would have started. Or at least outperformed him enough. But the timeline part, Trev, that's the part that I thought was interesting. The timetable. A lot of people want to say by the end of spring, by this date. Marcus Freeman basically said kind of, look, when someone makes it clear to us, I'm the starter, we'll name him the starter. What were your thoughts on his comments on all that, Trev?
Yeah, I mean, initially, it kind of confirms a lot of the things that we've talked about so far this offseason is there is no time. We've gotten so many awesome questions and submissions between mailbags and buy-sell holds and super chats about, when will Notre Dame name a starting quarterback? And a lot of our resounding answers has been, well, when one deserves to be named. When I mean deserves, I don't mean based on an arbitrary timeline that Gino Guidugli or Mike Denbrock or Marcus Freeman sets for the team. It's just whenever one is ready to be named. And he reassured that, which is, for me, that's very reassuring to hear. The biggest thing that I took away from his comments was the fact that he was very open around, hey, here's our game plan for this. And we are going to communicate what that plan is with the quarterbacks beforehand. I think when you are in a quarterback competition that is this close and amongst three guys, communication is key. And it is very, 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 very important that you explain, hey, here's the decision we're going with and the why behind it. And I really appreciated that because we've seen horror stories before go down in South Bend with quarterback competitions where things weren't communicated properly. Marcus Freeman touched on, hey, you're going to be taking this rep with this group, and here's why. You're going to be taking this rep with this group, and here's why. And then at the end of the day, you're going to sit down and you can think about, all right, here's how we evaluate these guys, grand scheme of everything. And so that was really big for me. But I really appreciated the timetable comment because you can't put a time frame on something that you don't know when you're going to see what you need to see. And I think that's the most important part. So for me, really appreciated everything that he said.
He said, look, what if you make a deadline and you're not, and no one's established himself by that? That could be negative or positive. The negative could be, okay, we have decided that we're going to name a starter after the spring game. Okay. The negative is you get to the end of spring and you're like, dude, none of these guys earned a starting role. None of them stepped up and led, produced. Our offense got our butts kicked by the defense every day. We turned the ball over a ton. None of the guys really stepped up. One guy'd have today CJ had a great day. Next day he threw 8 picks. And that same day, Kenny had a great day. The next day he threw 8 picks. Steve had a great day. Then the next day Steve threw 8 picks. I mean, you're going to arbitrarily name a starter because you've set a timeline or announced a timeline for that. And if you don't announce it then people like in our side of this, people and fans, social media are going to then run with all the reasons why. Some people will think it's a great competition. Some think because they all sucked. Then the flip side of it is you set an arbitrary deadline for it. But what if it's like, dude, all 3 of these kids are playing like they deserve to be starting at Notre Dame right now. And I'm going to set an arbitrary deadline when nobody has truly risen above. They're all playing their butts off. They've all earned the right to go in late July, early August, whenever camp starts, with an opportunity to keep competing. Now, that's when you start to say, guys, we can't set an arbitrary deadline, but we got to start making some decisions on certain things. So maybe one guy hasn't separated, but if 2 of them have kind of emerged over a third, you got to start working more with that one and that two to let them more battle now that the third guy's kind of falling behind. So I think all those things factor into you've got to just because you haven't made a decision on a starter doesn't mean you haven't narrowed it down to we're down to two. You don't need to announce that, but that's when you got at some point in time though you do have to say. I think the one thing I would say that the staff has to set a deadline for is by this certain time, by the end of the first week of camp, we have to at least be down to two and start ramping up the reps for those two. It's going to be really hard to get ready to play at Miami if the first 4 weeks of fall camp, you're splitting reps equally between three guys. And that's really what I think you're seeing a battle for this spring will be who kind of goes into the final round. And, like Sean's daughter's in The Voice, right? Like some people, they move on to the next round to compete. Some people don't. You did okay. You did a good job, but you weren't quite as good as this person over here. And that's what I think the spring is more about. Maybe someone steps up and is like, dude, it was so clear that was a guy. But based on what we saw yesterday, I don't know if anyone's going to be able to just be that much better than everybody else. I think that's what the true competition is this spring, Trevor, is what's the pecking order going into fall camp? We know what it is coming into the spring. It's what it should be. It's a seniority thing, essentially. It's Steve was the backup last year. Kenny's older than CJ, and then CJ's older than Blake Hebert. That's the order. Day one, what's it going to be like on day 15? That's going to be interesting because that's going to tell us a lot about who has the best shot to win it once we get to fall camp.
Yeah, I agree with you. If there's going to be a timeline on something, it has to be because the goal is to still whittle out who's going to be the starting quarterback come August 31st. And even though all of these guys are flashy and each one of them has tools and a skill set that can deem them and make them the starter at Notre Dame, at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is still finding somebody who's going to be commanding and leading your offense going down into Miami. And you need to make sure that that person has ample time to make sure that they get prepared and they get ready. I'm with you. I think the spring is going to be whittling out. You don't want to be in a scenario where you have three guys going into fall camp where it's like, yeah, it could be any one of them at this point. And then what? Then you start to have an expedited process of like, all right, well, we got to go from 3 to 1 in less than a month. Yeah, so I'm with you. I'm with you on that because at some point you are going to have to make that decision.
And I don't think playing two is an option because, and this will lead us into the second part of the conversation. The Marcus Freeman responded to a question that I asked, and the question was, he's always talked about, hey, we're going to have to fit what we do schematically around the talent we have. And I think for the most part, Notre Dame's done a pretty good job of that. Al Golden didn't always do a great job of that in 2020, but I think a big part of that was they didn't really know what they had because there was some new guys and he was new there. And that was kind of part of the issue, I think, early last year with the Notre Dame offense is like, yeah, I know what guys can do in practice, but I don't know what they can do in games necessarily. But then as Mike Denbrock learned more about his team, they started playing a lot better. As Al Golden started learning more about his team in 2022, they started playing a lot better down the stretch. I mean, they were very good against Syracuse. And I mean, look, the defense isn't the reason that Notre Dame lost to Stanford, although I would argue, you did have a chance in the fourth quarter to make some stops when you had a lead. But again, you held a team to 16 points. You're not the reason that you lost the football game. But they were very good against Clemson. They were very good against BC. And then, of course, you had a bunch of injuries, and that hurt you in the USC game. But they got better. They weren't lights out, but they definitely got better. And then, of course, you come out the next year, and the defense takes a huge jump. So and a big part of that was he had a better understanding of who J.D. Bertrand was, who Marist was, who these guys were, and he could adjust what he did around his players. And we know that we saw Mike Denbrock do that last year. So the question I asked was essentially, what's the challenge that you have as an offensive staff and as a coaching staff in tailoring your offense to fit your personnel when you don't know who the quarterback is going to be? And here's his answer, and this is why I don't think playing two guys is an option like it may be. Like, I said I would have been okay in 2023 if they'd have gone into that season. Hey, look, Tyler, don't leave because you're going to play. You're going to play. You're a very different type of quarterback than Sam Hartman. Yeah, it's not just going to be the runner role that you had as a freshman, but you're going to play because you're a playmaker. We can use you. I don't know if they said that to him. I wish they would have said that to him to try to convince him to stay and not leave. But in that situation, you could have definitely used two guys. I don't think that you can do that. But and I think that Marcus Freeman's comment here that he said in response to my question speaks to that. I think I think speaks to that. He's not responding to whether you can play two, just so we're clear. But I'm saying his response to my question tells us, Trev, that it does have to be one. It's like, it's like Highlander, right? There can only be one in this particular situation. But this is what he said in response to my question. He goes, I would think they all have similar skill sets, right? Kenny might argue with me that he's as good as a runner as Riley, but I don't know. He would laugh at that point in time. I think they all have similar skill sets with the ability to throw it. The ability, if they need to keep the ball in their hands and extend the play or have an option to run the ball, they can. As we look at it from the big picture, is okay. We knew what Riley's strengths were. We knew what Sam Hartman's strengths were. Now we have an idea of what the collective group in that room, the strengths are. And so how do we tailor what we do offensively to fit the quarterback? And what are we going to ask that guy to do? You've heard me say it many times. Great coaches call or ask their players to do what they do well. It is not a play call that you created. It's calling what your guys do well. And that's the objective of the spring, is how can we tailor what we do offensively and call things that we believe our quarterback can perform well. So I thought that was something that was obviously a very good comment, because he said two things. He's like, what you all have to understand about all three of our quarterbacks is all of them can throw it and all of them can use their legs to make plays. And I think now to varying degrees, we may argue that this guy throws it better than the other two. This guy runs better than the other two, but they all are sort of going to run a similar type of offense. Two things about that, Trev. Number one is that's a great benefit to Mike Denbrock, because he can shift the offense the way he wants to shift it, big picture. And then once a starter is established, then you just refine a couple things here and there that quarterback maybe reads a little better. We're going to run smash no matter what, right, as an offensive coordinator. But if this guy starts for me, we may run it more because he reads it and throws it great. This guy, he's okay with it in certain situations, but it's not something we're going to run 5 different variations of smash because he reads it so well. Like that's not changing your offense. That's just, we're running this, but we're just going to kind of slowly or like just slightly modify it this way to fit what this guy does well or that guy does well. You don't need to make a wholesale adjustment the way that maybe they had to make going from Sam Hartman to Riley Leonard from a season to a season, or even going from Tyler Buckner to Sam Hartman. So that was number one, Trev. But then the second part of it said to me, and this is a takeaway I had later, is, but this is why there can only be one. Because I don't think Kenny is such a dynamic runner that if he's not your one, that you just find reasons to get him the ball. And it's not that he can't make plays, but it's like, are you really going to put Kenny Minchie in the game, who's not the starter, to carry the football or run the football, when you have Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and Aeneas Williams and Keedron Young and Jabron Payne and Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison and Will Paul? I mean, I could go on. Kenny's not Tyler Buckner. And if you had a quarterback type of guy that was going to do that, I'm putting Tyler Buckner in the game to do that. I also think that that's not Kenny's number one strength. Kenny's number one strength is throwing the football, not running the football. I said it before, he is a drop back passing quarterback who happens to be athletic. So is CJ. And Steve is as well. He's not as athletic as maybe the other two, but go watch the Purdue game if you don't think Steve Angeli can use his legs to make some plays. So I think that there's just not enough of a variation of a skill set, Trevor, to say, hey, we can use two. Because if you use two, that tells me that nobody separated and kind of took hold of that position, and that's not a great place to be. Like You want to know when Steve Spurrier's teams kind of started to decline? It's that era where he started using 2 quarterbacks. That basically Doug Johnson and Rex Grossman are not different. It was Jesse Palmer and Rex Grossman, right? Wasn't it them? They're not different quarterbacks, Trev. You know what I mean? Like they were guys that were kind of, they had different skill sets, but as far as just how they run an offense, they were pretty much the same guy. And that just wasn't a recipe for success, in my opinion.
Yeah, if you go with 2 guys with all 3 quarterbacks having similar skill sets, it tells me one of 2 things. 1, what you just said. 2, it tells me that this coaching staff didn't want to make a decision, if that makes sense. It's either nobody separated themselves or there was a fear of who might make a decision based on what we decide to go with. And so to feed multiple mouths per se, we're going to go with multiple people. Either one of those is not an ideal situation to be in, especially when you have quarterbacks. Look, I understand why there was multiple quarterbacks played in 2021. Jack Cohn, great from the pocket, great passer, grossly underrated, especially for his time being at Notre Dame. But
playing behind that line?
Yeah, yes. But Tyler Buckner brought in an element that Jack Cohn just couldn't provide, but there's within reason, there's no skill set that Kenny brings to the table that CJ or Steve don't. There's no skill set that CJ brings to the table that Steve or Kenny don't. And the list goes on to varying degrees. Do I think that in a straight line speed contest, do I think that Kenny Minchie is a little bit faster than Steve Angeli? Yeah, I do. But not to the point where it's, well, this is why you have to play both. And not, especially not when you have the running back room that you have, to your point that you made earlier. So, yeah, it all just speaks down to whittling it down to one guy. And then, Brian, you played the position. I played the position. It's also about getting in a rhythm. Because even in years where it made sense to play both, like in 21, you could still see that it would affect Jack Cohn from time to time.
At times.
That it was I could get yanked in the middle of a series. I could get yanked in the middle of, a half, and it's that messes with a rhythm to some degree.
But also, Trev, it's not even just about I could get yanked. It's also about you're rolling, and all of a sudden you make the decision to put Tyler in, and now I'm not back on the field for 20 minutes, and we've kind of lost that rhythm. Or I'm not in a good rhythm, and then I don't get that next series to kind of get into a good rhythm, and now I'm not only not in a good rhythm, but now I'm cold because Tyler put a drive together or made a big play, and then the other team's offense goes on a nice long drive. It could be a momentum killer. And the way that Notre Dame did it, at times it wasn't just like if it was just like for a play or a package, Jack comes off, Tyler runs 2 plays, goes back on. That's a little bit better. But there were times they just put Tyler in and just like, okay, Tyler, just go run the offense. I think that got a little bit challenging. So there has to be a unique scenario, to your point, Trev, where you're going to use 2. I thought Florida did a great – I talked about Florida with Spurrier. When did Florida use 2 quarterbacks and it worked great? 2006, because Chris Leak was the starter, but then they put Tim Tebow in short yardage or goal line and use his big body and his running ability to just score a touchdown. But that wasn't the same as Tebow's going to go in there and run the 3rd series. It was short yardage. Chris runs off. Tim runs on. He gets the first down. CJ goes right, or Chris goes CJ. That's his older brother, CJ Leak. Don't want to bring that up around Notre Dame fans. But Chris Leak goes back on there. I have to tell you that story, Trev. That was a little bit before your time. But Chris goes back in there. Tim goes off. It worked because they had very clearly defined roles and limited roles for Tim Tebow. So I think those things aren't they're just not a group that is compatible to play together. Now, if you do have to play 2 because no one separates, then you do that because no one separated. You don't do that because, boy, they just both played so good. I don't know how that's going to work. That was the mistake of 2016. Just pick a quarterback and go with them. I don't like your decision. I think you're making the wrong decision. But you're hurting your team by pretending that you really think Malik Zaire is in this quarterback competition, when all along you wanted it to be Deshaun's because you set Malik up to fail. Now, I thought Kelly made the wrong decision. I'm not trying to rehash that. My point isn't that Kelly should have started Malik. I've said that a million times. It doesn't matter. It was a decade ago now. The point is, the mistake wasn't just that I think he picked the wrong guy. The bigger mistake is that the way that they did it, it prevented the offense from really having an identity and having the kind of leadership structure you needed to be successful. And then by the time you turn to Deshaun in game 2, your identity as a team had already been established. It wasn't a good one. And so that is like the concern that I have about it taking too long. But also I felt from that comment, Trev, that you won't see 2. But here's why the bigger takeaway from that comment, and that is that comment shows to us that they agree that we are on the same page with the Notre Dame coaching staff, which is you don't have to greatly alter what you're doing actually, I don't think you have to alter at all during the spring of what you like. And if anything, Mike Denbrock can lean even harder into what he likes as a passing coach. These are the concepts I like that I think are going to work best against our 2025 schedule. Because why? Because if I'm leaning into what I like and what fits our pass catchers, but what if that benefits so-and-so more? Exactly. Because if this is what I think is best for the type of receivers I have and the type of what I have on the line and what I have at quarterback, I think we need to be able to get under center and run the ball so we can run more play action pass. I'm just making that up as a potential thing. Yeah, but and I want to run this and I want to run that. Yeah, but all that favors Kenny, or all that favors Steve, or all that favors CJ. Then you're like, exactly. Because then I'm going to find the guy that best runs what I do, because I'm now building it around everybody else. Since those 3 quarterbacks are very similar in skill set, who runs my offense the best? So it's a little bit different than other years, Trev. And I think that the fact that Marcus Freeman said, look, they're all kind of similar, gives Mike Denbrock a unique opportunity where he can actually now focus instead of what the quarterbacks do best, because they're all going to be different. Like, they all have a similar skill set, but they're not all going to read every single concept the same way. They're not all going to be equally as effective at quick game or RPOs or play action or rollouts or whatever. So you run what you like best, see if anybody separates that way. That is something that could help them make this decision, which could lean into this concept, this stuff over here that fits everybody else better, fits the 10 better. And then now you have to see which quarterback is going to be able to run that most effectively. If you think that you like all 3, which I think they do, could be something that it becomes a bit of a separator for Notre Dame in this decision-making process, Trev, which is not normally how it goes.
I think for me, it also kind of nullifies the idea. I think that there's this idea that while Notre Dame is going in a quarterback battle, the offense is just kind of waiting in the wings to see who that quarterback is going to be for them to start going through changes offensively that we want to see. But with all of them having similar skill sets, you can continue to keep building on the momentum you had from this past season. Then when a starter is named, they're just taking the share of the reps. But all quarterbacks on this roster have the ability to throw the slot fade. We've seen it. All quarterbacks to varying degrees have the ability to read defenses. Now it's just going to depend on, okay, when the starter is named, you can now really start taking off as an offense. But I think that there has been this idea, not just this year at Notre Dame, but with other schools, sometimes there's truth to it, that during a quarterback competition, everybody just kind of has to sit back and wait for when a starter is named, and then the offense can take off. But with 3 guys, all with very similar skill sets, I don't think that that's the case. And that puts Mike Denbrock, to your point, Bryan, in a very unique position to, you can continue to build on this offense as a whole schematically. And then when a starter gets named, a starter gets named.
Mm-hmm. So, Trev, speaking of a starter being named, this kind of leads into the next topic is, well, first of all, kind of thinking back on yesterday, when you think about just the overall quarterback room, the overall quarterback competition, what was kind of your takeaway from watching what we saw yesterday in relation to the quarterback competition? And I'll tell you what my reaction was. My reaction was that I was, and this is why I wrote the article I wrote today, Trev, is, you know what? I have a guy that I think is best. I have a guy that I think is second best, but not too far behind the best guy. And there's another guy that's a veteran who I probably think is third. At the end of the day, as I'm watching this team play, these guys throw yesterday, I'm watching Blake Hebert throw yesterday. I just kind of had this takeaway, like, you know what, man? Quarterback room's in really good position, really good state. It's a really healthy state, to the point where I may think CJ should be the starter, or I may think Kenny should be the starter. At the end of the day, if one of those two guys beats out the other one, they're going to be okay. At the end of the day, if those guys turn the ball over way too much and don't know the offense well enough or don't read defenses well enough, and Steve's the best guy at that, you're like, dude, if that's your worst option, boy, you're kind of all right. I mean, Trev, we watched Notre Dame go, 9-4 a couple years ago, actually 8-2 with Drew Pine as a starter. Tyler went Tyler went 1-2, right, that year. We watched Notre Dame go 8-2, including multiple wins over ranked teams with Drew Pine at quarterback. Drew Pine that year versus Steve Angeli in 2025. I'm taking, and I love Drew Pine as a young man. Great family. This isn't meant to be an insult to Drew, but Steve Angeli is bigger, more athletic, has a way better arm than what Drew did, and Notre Dame went 8-2. Like, if that's your worst option, like, you know what? I think they're going to be okay. Maybe they won't have the ceiling as a team, but when I watch those other two kids throw, and then you start thinking about Blake Hebert, and then that led me to start thinking about Noah Grubbs, you start saying, like, man, I kind of feel like, I was reading the Bible the other day, and I'm thinking about relating it to that. It's like, what did the Israelites feel when they finally kind of came out of the wilderness and went into the promised land? It's like, that's kind of how I feel from a football standpoint. Like, we've been in this quarterback wilderness for so long, and I feel like Riley kind of took us to the edge of it, and now it's like you see it in front of you. The promised land is in front of you, and you got to have great quarterback play to get there. And for a long time, Notre Dame didn't have that, so we were wandering in the wilderness, man. When's that quarterback guy going to step up? And I look at it now, and I'm like, dude, they're going to be all right, because unlike past years, it's not, if this guy doesn't step up, they're in trouble. If Tyler Buckner's not what we hope he is, they're in trouble. If Phil Jurkovec is not who we hope he is, then they're going to be stuck with Ian Book, with all due respect. If this guy's not as good as we hope he is, then this team isn't. If Brandon Wimbush isn't as good as we hope he is, they're going to be in trouble. Now it's kind of like, yeah, I got my favorite, but God, they're going to be okay, guys. Now and in the future. Because when I watched Kenny and CJ throw the ball around yesterday, and then I watched Blake Hebert throw the ball around yesterday. I'm thinking back and I'm watching Steve Angeli throw the ball around. I'm thinking, just 3 seasons ago, I was watching Drew Pine, Tyler Buckner, and Steve Angeli throw the ball around with Dylan Devizin, who's now a running back. Two of the 4 guys in that quarterback room are now playing skill positions for Notre Dame that aren't quarterback. Think about that. You realize, dude, I think they're in a great place. And so it's like, my fear, my concern about how's this team going to be was eased. And again, that's a bit of a hot take, and it wasn't just because of yesterday. It's my evaluation of these players over the last couple years. And then yesterday was just kind of that reminder of, you know what, B? They're going to be okay, man. This position is going to be all right, because these kids can flat out spin it. And you're about to enter a very different period of covering Notre Dame football because of this group right here. That was my big takeaway from watching practice yesterday. The culmination of getting to yesterday's practice.
For me, the biggest takeaway, one, overarching, I didn't go into the spring practice and learn anything new about this quarterback room. It just kind of confirmed a lot of the things that we had been talking about. They got some cats in that room that can spin it different. I finally had the opportunity to see it in person. It was awesome. For me, the biggest thing is we've seen position groups, different position rooms at Notre Dame elevate their floor, what their standard is, what the expectation is for that room. And we've seen it now really over the course of a decade, and it hits different rooms at different times. With Marcus Freeman, I think we've seen a little bit more of an expedited journey for some of these rooms in comparison to previous regimes. I think the quarterback room is now just caught up with where some of the other ones have. I mean, the offensive line for the longest time, it's always just been one of those, well, I don't really know who's going to replace them, but whoever it's going to be, I think they're going to be okay. That's been that way for the offensive line, tight end room for a while. Running backs, it really started with Josh Adams, and then it was just kind of, you know what, I know they're losing Josh Adams, but, they got Dexter Williams. I know they're losing Dexter Williams, got Tony Jones. No, they're losing Tony Jones, they got Kyron Williams. And it starts to fall in line. More recently, it's been things at corner. Yeah, they're losing Cam Harp, and, they got BMO and a couple young guys waiting in the wings. Yeah, I know BMO's no longer there, but now, they got Christian Gray and Leonard Moore, and you're starting to see it. Linebacker, it's the same thing. Man, you lose JD and Maris. Yeah, but you still have Kaiser and Drake Bowen's really sharp. Now it's the quarterback room is now caught up with that, which is really promising. There's some other rooms that need to get there. Now, wide receiver room has been another hot topic of discussion. I think that the wide receiver room this year could have the year that Riley Leonard had for the quarterback room last year, this season, which is really exciting. But to me, that's what yesterday's practice showed me, is that now the quarterback room is finally at the spot where it doesn't have to be, well, it's this guy or bust. Like you said, like all of the other position groups before it has followed up. Because before it was man, they really need Jalen Smith in this linebacker room, because if not, this linebacking room looks a lot different. And now you look at it, it's like, okay, well, yeah, they got Drake Bowen, and man, they got Kingston. It's really exciting. Well, what happens if Kingston doesn't pan out? Yeah, well, they have Jaden Osbury and Madden Framo and Jalen Sneed and Teddy Rizak and Preston Zinter. And the list goes on and on and on. You say the same thing about the cornerback room now. I think we're going to have a lot of similar conversations around the safety room now that Xavier Watts has departed. So that's really exciting for me. And that is probably my biggest takeaway from yesterday of, you look at this quarterback room, and whether it is one of CJ or Kenny or Steve or Blake, now or down the road, it's comforting, because now you can truly have a competition of who's the best going to be, not we need this singular player to ball out for Notre Dame to be successful this year. That's really exciting. It's in an awesome spot to be in.
So you're saying is, not only does it not matter as much for that singular quarterback because of the talent in the room overall, but am I reading you correctly in that you're also saying that because of the talent around that quarterback, that starter doesn't even necessarily have to maximize every ounce of potential he has to carry the football team the way that they may have needed in the past? Am I reading that correctly?
Correct. Yeah.
That's a good place to be, man. So then we have to ask the question, does it matter who starts a quarterback? I have an answer for this one, but the premise, what I'm saying is, if we feel the way that we feel, then does it matter who? And when we mean who matter, we're talking about Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchie, and CJ Carr. That's what we're referring to. Does it matter who starts a quarterback? I'll let you answer that question first, Trev, before I answer mine.
To me, the answer is still yes. For the same reason why it still matters in the other position rooms, it does still matter to some degree who starts. The quarterback is a different beast than linebacker for obvious reasons. They can rotate a little bit more. But at the quarterback position specifically, you start talking about the ceiling of the team. And I am under the impression that there are certain guys in that room, that can take this team a little bit farther than what others can. I was really impressed with Blake Hebert. Like I said after yesterday, I think that dude has an absolute hose attached to his arm. I don't think we're going to see that on the field in 2025 in a meaningful game, in a meaningful situation. Now, I do think in comparison to previous years, if there is some unforeseen situation where Blake Hebert has to go in and play in a meaningful, I don't think that all hope is lost because of some of the supporting cast around him. But I say all of that to say, I do think it does still matter who starts, because we're talking about the ceiling and how far this team can go. And I do think that ceiling is higher. But it's not, in comparison to years past, it's not a Notre Dame is either going to be bowl eligible with this team or they're not going to be with this guy starting at quarterback. Now it's just, are they going to make it back to the national championship? Are they going to make it back to the semifinals? Are they going to host a home playoff game? That is now the varying degrees of what we're talking about, in my opinion. So, yes, I do think it still matters who starts at quarterback, but the conversation isn't, boy, if Tyler Buchner doesn't work out, I don't even know if they're going to make the playoffs. I think it's just a question of how far do they make it in the playoffs, depending on who starts. That's my read on the situation.
So what you're saying is the floor doesn't matter quite as much, but the ceiling does. And
Correct.
That's exactly where I'm at. And here's what I mean by it matters, but not in the same way it has in the past. And this kind of goes back to my overall feeling of the quarterback room that yesterday reminded me of. And I'll tell you exactly why yesterday reminded me of it. I'm just going to be as open and honest as possible here. It matters from the standpoint of, I think Notre Dame is a playoff team no matter who starts a quarterback. And our guy, Andrew Gilmore, had a comment that I think is a very fair comment. He said, I think it matters because if he gets it wrong, they could be eliminated by the end of September. That's actually not my fear. That's true for all three of the quarterbacks. For no matter what you feel the pros and cons are, that could be true for all three of the quarterbacks. But I think losing 2 games in September is a much bigger issue for the entire team. It means you have issues on the offensive line. It means you have issues with your defense. I think all these quarterbacks are capable of winning minimum 10 games, but I think all three of these quarterbacks, I think it's 4, I meant 3, because Blake Hebert's a true freshman. I'm not as worried about that. I think all these guys with the team around them. This is the thing that this is kind of where my response to Andrew's coming from is with the team around them. They don't need the quarterback to go out and play like a Heisman winner to go 3-1 or 4-0 in September. If they can't go 2-1 against Miami, Arkansas, Purdue, or 2-2 against Miami, A&M at home, Purdue at home, and Arkansas, then you got much bigger problems in your quarterback position. That's where I'm at. So that's not a concern for me. If you go 2-2 with any of these quarterbacks, you might have gone 2-2 with all of them, because it means your defense isn't as good, your offensive line is struggling, you're not where you think you need to be at the skill positions. Because here's the deal: if the quarterback play against Arkansas is mediocre, Notre Dame still has a significantly better roster than Arkansas does, and their quarterback's not an elite player either. If Notre Dame can't go 1-1 against Miami and A&M, who are both good football teams but not elite football teams, that their roster is still better, if not significantly better, than both of those teams. So if you lose, I have a hard time believing any of these quarterbacks is going to be able to play bad enough to where he's the reason that they lose. I think it means there's bigger issues afoot. I think you hit the nail on the head, Trevor, of why it does matter who starts. Because it's not so much about getting to the show. It's about what do you do when you get there? And we always talk about this. Because what's interesting is I've seen Andrew make a couple comments in the chat, and he's making really, like, I get where he's coming from with the lights. Like, he talks about, like, he thinks now's the time for CJ Carr. Well, here's the thing. I could argue that starting CJ or Kenny actually gives you the greatest chance to potentially lose 2 games in September. So you're kind of making 2 different arguments. Because I think the thing about Steve Angeli is, with Steve, you know, the argument is that he'll make the least amount of mistakes and those type of things, right? It comes down to, it's the young guys you're worried about going out there and making those mistakes, making that bad turnover that could hurt the team. Now, I don't necessarily accept that premise for a host of reasons that I don't really want to get into today, because it's not the point. The point is, if your thought is, because Andrew, you made another comment that I think makes a lot of sense, and it's this. He made this comment before that. He says, Freeman just got a big extension. I'll bring it up. He said, Freeman just got a big extension. He is able to take a longer-term approach to the program. I hope that he narrows it down to 2 post-spring and makes a decision after week 1 of fall camp or sooner. Here's my response to that, Andrew. What if the best answer long term also puts you at the greatest risk of maybe going 2-2 in September or losing 2 games in September. Because I actually think that he's right in that Freeman can take a longer view and needs to take a longer view of this. Not in that he shouldn't care as much about who gives me the best chance to beat Miami, but who gives me the best chance to beat Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, Texas, Clemson, those type of teams. And that guy on August 31st may not be your best chance to beat Miami. Now, he may be. It may be both. So I actually want Coach Freeman to take a bit of a longer view of that. So, and Justin Kane just mentioned, Riley Leonard dropped a game to Northern Illinois. So certainly possible to lose to Miami and A&M. Exactly my point. Because I'll take losing one of those early games if it means the guy that gives us our highest ceiling gets the opportunity to learn from some of those early struggles to then be prepared to thrive down the road. But again, Riley Leonard didn't drop a game to Northern Illinois. Notre Dame dropped a game to Northern Illinois. Riley Leonard did not give up an 80-plus yard touchdown reception to a running back. Riley Leonard didn't fail to cover a wheel route to the running back. Riley Leonard didn't drop a pass that might have gone for 6. Riley Leonard had plenty of issues in that game. Riley Leonard is not why the offensive line got their butts whooped for 60 minutes by Northern Illinois and why the defense couldn't stop Northern Illinois from running the football, which is kind of my whole point. You lost that game because your team was not ready to play that day. If the Notre Dame team, if Riley Leonard would have played the exact same game against Northern Illinois that he played, but everybody around him played like they did against Texas A&M, Notre Dame's 12-0 in the regular season. Or at least they're 2-0 to start the season. That's kind of my point. But once you got to the playoffs, you needed 13 at quarterback if you were going to beat Georgia, if you were going to beat Penn State, and if you're going to have a chance to beat Ohio State. And that's why I think this conversation matters. Not that and Andrew, I'm not pushing back on you. I'm just saying these are some of the things that you're saying are sparking very interesting things that go into the decision-making that the staff has to make. And that's what I think is really fascinating about this decision. And a lot of people don't look at it that way from a coaching standpoint. So to me, Trev, it matters. And it matters from the standpoint of, I believe there's 2 quarterbacks on this roster this year that if you can get them playing to their best potential for this season, meaning not they can play to their maximum career potential this year, but that they can be the best version of themselves at where they are in their development, give this team the best chance to play for a championship. Because I think at the end of the day, even though I think Notre Dame's got a great roster, you're still going to need your quarterback to make some big-time plays and some big-time moments. You saw that with Ohio State against Notre Dame. For all the butt-whooping Ohio State did on Notre Dame early, if Will Howard does not complete that 3rd and 11 pass to Jeremiah Smith and Notre Dame gets the ball back with over 2 minutes left and a chance to tie the way they had been shredding Ohio State's defense in the second half, we might be going to overtime. So you still need your quarterback to be that money player. And I think that matters. And so here's where I'm at. It doesn't matter that the one guy that I think above all others is the best quarterback wins the job. And I mean, CJ Carr, I've said that before. I think CJ Carr, his ceiling is higher than others. I just think the way he fits, all the things he can do, I think he's a special quarterback. I graded him out as a 5-star top 25 player. But also graded Kenny Minchey out as a top 100 player. If Kenny Minchey goes out there and beats out CJ Carr, let's roll, son. I mean, that's where I'm at. If CJ Carr beats out Kenny Minchey, let's roll, son. That's where I'm at. Let's go. Let's do this thing. I still think it matters that one of those 2 guys wins the starting job. Because at the end of the day, Trev, you nailed it. The floor is as high as it's been for this Notre Dame football team because of everything else around this team. And none of these guys are a liability, in my opinion, to the point where they can't get this team to the playoff. Steve Angeli can lead this Notre Dame football team to the college football playoffs. I don't have a doubt in my mind that he can do that with the talent around him. So can Kenny. So can CJ. My decision comes down to who gives this team. I mean, people say I've been accused of being a Steve Angeli hater. I literally said Rutgers wins at least 2 more games with Steve Angeli at quarterback than they won last year. That tells me I have a high. But what's the standard? It's to win it all. And I think those 2 kids, whoever performs the best of that duo, of that 1-2 punch, that's who gives Notre Dame the best chance to beat Georgia again, to beat Ohio State, to beat Oregon, to beat Texas, to beat Alabama, to beat a Penn State, to beat a Clemson. I think it's one of those 2 guys. And yesterday kind of got me excited about it, but it also kind of reminded me where it's like, I love that kid. He's a great kid, but these 2 are just different. And the best teams have guys throughout their roster that you just look at and say, that may be a great kid, but that cat's different. That cat's different. And that's why I still do think it matters that the higher ceiling player in this instance gets the job. And a lot of it, Trevor, has to do with what you said is it's the team around him. You don't need the quarterback in September to necessarily carry the team the way you did in the past. You had to start. I know this for a fact. There were Notre Dame coaches that thought Ian Book should have been the starting quarterback in 2018 before the season. But Chip Long knew, and Brian Kelly knew, we can't beat Michigan without Brandon Wimbush as our starter. Just the matchup was such that was a really good Michigan team. They thought the chances would be less because they thought that Michigan's pass rush would present some problems for a guy that they needed Brandon's running ability, and they did. And there's that 3rd and 11 play where I think it was Josh Uche. Uche is coming off the edge. He's got Brandon dead to rights. Brandon spins out of it, runs and scrambles for a first down. Notre Dame goes down to get points. I mean, you needed that ability in that game. But after that, you could – but that's because Brandon needed to carry the team to victory. I think the makeup of this roster and who they play, because Miami's not 2018 Michigan. Texas A&M, I don't think, is 2018 Michigan. I don't think they need that guy to necessarily put the team on his shoulders and say, we need you to go win the day. And if that's the case, then I've got some bigger questions about some other positions on this team than I do quarterback. So that's my stance of why it still matters, Trev.
Yeah, I mean, you and I are in the same boat. Notre Dame is at a spot now as a program where they don't need, in the regular season, their quarterback to play like a Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback to go 11-1 or 12-0 or even 10-2. You can just go back through and look at Riley Leonard's game-by-game stats last year. They beat Navy 51-14. He passed for 178 yards. They beat Purdue 66-7. He passed for 112 yards. They beat Army 49-14, passed for 148 yards. And yes, I know that he added a different dynamic with his legs, but even so, in that game against Army, he rushed for 30 yards, no touchdowns. In that game against Navy, he had 83 yards on the ground, but he's not doing things.
He also only played like one series in the third quarter in that game too. But your point stands. Yeah.
That even more fuels the point. And it's not like he only played a half because he was just this unstoppable force. Just the team around him is that good. Right. I mean,
he did throw some dimes in both of those games, but he's not the reason Jeremiah Love ran it for 60-some yards. He's not the reason in both games. The team was way better. Mm-hmm. You needed Riley to beat Georgia, not Army, not Navy.
Yep, and all of that reflected in the postseason. Riley Leonard goes for over 200 yards in the air, 30 yards on the ground, and a rushing touchdown and a passing touchdown against IU. He's your leading rusher against Georgia, passed for 223 against Penn State, passed for 255 and 2 touchdowns against Ohio State in the national championship. That's where it matters. That's why it matters who starts at the end of the day, because there's 2 quarterbacks on the roster that I firmly believe that can do that. And there's one that I'm not saying that he can't. I just have more reservations about in the postseason.
Yeah, and I don't think he can. I mean, I think your team is going to have to really play at a higher level. And I could be wrong about Steve, and if he starts, I hope that I am wrong about him. But just yesterday kind of confirmed that. Just like it's just like we talked about linebacker. Like, why can we say that at linebacker when we're like, dude, Madden Faremo is just a different cat. There's just a different animal there, man. And And or boy, Leonard Moore's he's just a different cat. But then you say that at quarterback, and it's like, oh, but it's like, dude, look, say whatever you want. I know quarterback. I know that position, and I'm watching those two kids throw, and I'm just like, and we said it all last year when CJ and Kenny were always on one side, and then Steve and Gino Gaduli, or Steven, when Riley came back, Steve and Riley on one side. You're like, dude, the ball looks a whole lot different going this way than it does coming this way. I had a buddy of mine who was at the Georgia Tech game, and he said the same thing. And his son, his nephew was with him, and he's like, it looks a whole lot different when number 8 throws it than because CJ wasn't fully healthy then. He goes, it looks different when number 8 throws the football, and that's kind of where I'm at. So I do think it still matters. So fun quarterback conversation, Trev. We're gonna get to the mailbag next, folks. But before we do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review, whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple, or whatever podcast platform you like. Just takes you a couple minutes, and it helps us tremendously when you do that. So we're going to mailbag next, but before we do, folks, again, hit that like button. We appreciate you. Looking forward to the next part of this discussion on the Irish Breakdown podcast. So, Mr. Trowbridge, you ready for a mailbag, man? Little daily mailbag action here.
Always.
And we're going to get started with a super chat from Packer fan Total Access. Thank you so much for this. He also has his own YouTube channel, I believe, if this is the gentleman that emailed me the other day, or texted me the other day. He's also a Notre Dame fan. He says, absolutely love the channel. Quick question. Which of the top 3 receivers do you think the passing game will run through? I'm going to give my 3, Trevor, and I'm curious if we're on the same page. I think it's still Jaden Greathouse, no particular order. Jaden Greathouse, Malachi Fields, and I still think the third option is going to be a kind of a tight end. But if I'm going to go with receivers, I think the third guy is my to be determined player, because I think Jordan Faison and Will Pauling will bring value, but I still think this pass game is going to look for and hunt for somebody that can be a big play weapon, whether that's Will Pauling, maybe it is Jordan Faison, but they need to show that to me. Maybe it's KK, maybe it's Cam Williams, maybe it's Micah Gilbert. I don't know that the third guy is as clearly defined as maybe some people think it is, where it's basically just Fields, Greathouse, and Faison. It could be, but I'm still thinking that a third player emerges. But again, my third option I still think is that this year is going to be Eli Raridan. I think Eli Raridan is going to be even more of a focal point of this offense even than what Mitchell Evans was last year. Not at any fault of Mitchell Evans. I just think you're going to have a quarterback that's more comfortable attacking the parts of the field where the tight end is used than Riley did for much of last season.
Yeah, I've said this before. I think Eli Raridan is going to have a Cole Kmet-esque type of season when it comes to being a part of the vertical downfield threat in the offense. If we're just going with receivers, honestly, what I think it's going to be, I think that third option, because you and I are on the same page, Jaden Greathouse, Malachi Fields, 1-2, call it a combination of whatever you want. I don't know what the stats are going to look like, but I think week in and week out, you're going to have one of those two, if not both of them, really, really stepping up head and shoulders above the rest. That's who in the pre-games, everybody's going to be like, yo, Notre Dame has this wide receiver duo, Jaden Greathouse, Malachi Fields. They really push the threshold on some cornerbacks. That third option for me, right now, as of end of March, I think it's going to be a flavor of the week type of deal if we're just talking receivers. I think 1 week it'll be a Jordan Faison week. I think another week it could be a Will Pauling week. I think you could have a KK Smith week. I think you could have a Cam Williams week. I think you could have a Micah Gilbert week. I think that's what it's going to look like, because Notre Dame does have, despite there still being some question marks about the skilled position group at receiver, I think there's enough talent there, enough good talent, that it could be something like that. I think it'll be just whatever the opponent that week dictates, if I'm being honest. If they go up against a defense that is just like, you know what, they just don't allow big plays. Going into the end of this regular season, like, man, they've only given up 4 pass plays all year long of 30 yards or longer. I think you could see a week where it's like, yo, maybe that's just where Jordan Faison just goes nuts. Has one of those games where he has, 6 for 85, all underneath, all moving the chains. I could see it in a week where there's teams that struggle. They don't cover well out of the slot. I could see that being something where they line up one of their speed guys and they're just eating downfield all day long. That's how I kind of view the third option at receiver. I don't know if it's going to be, when everything's all said and done, I don't know if it's going to be one guy, one specific third target. I think it could be a flavor of the week type of deal.
Good stuff, Trev.
Yeah.
Wanted to bring this one up a little earlier than it is in the order because it does relate to the conversation we just had about quarterback.
Yeah. Salty Virginia Peanuts, is there any way that Blake Hebert could enter the discussion for QB1 this spring?
The only way, Salty, I see that happening is if there's just a mess of injuries and the guy that's left standing is playing really poorly. And it's not that Blake doesn't have skill. We saw he's the, as I said in yesterday's show, if you came to Notre Dame, like say you're an NFL scout and you had no knowledge of Notre Dame's roster and you're just I should probably be a bad example because if you're an NFL scout and you have no knowledge of Notre Dame's roster, you probably shouldn't be an NFL scout. But let's just say you're a high school football coach there because you respect the Notre Dame coaches, or you're bringing your son's a recruit. You're bringing them. You're not real familiar with the roster, and you're just looking at the quarterback room and you just look at their body types. You're going to look at it and be like, hey, number 12 is and you say, hey, look, we've got a senior, a junior, a sophomore, and a freshman on our roster. Who do you think is who? I think this is how it would go. Okay, 12's the senior. That's Blake Hebert. 13 is the junior. That's CJ. 18's the sophomore. That's Steve. And 8's the freshman because he's still got a baby face, and that's Kenny. Because Kenny still's got that baby face. You saw it yesterday. Just as far as their body types and how they look. Blake looks like he's the oldest guy in the room. And he's the thickest guy in the room. He's already the heaviest quarterback. And it's not, Trev, you saw it. It's not bad weight. He's just a thick, strong kid. And he's got a real live arm. He's athletic. He's just super raw. Technically, he's super raw. Not knowing the offense. He hasn't played a ton of football. He missed a big chunk of his junior year with an injury. So he just needs time to develop. And so, and he knows that, I think that's why he came to Notre Dame, is because he's not in a hurry to be a day one starter. Because if you want to be a day one starter as a 2025 quarterback, this isn't the school for you. You know what I mean? It's like this. It's like, I want to be a day one starter. So where are you going to go to school? I'm going to go to Texas and battle Arch. Like, probably not a good idea. I'm going to go Notre Dame and beat out CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie and Steve Angeli. Probably not a good idea. I think he knows, look, my time will come. I'm going to have a chance to compete, but right now it's about learning. It's about growing. It's about developing my game. And eventually he'll be in this. Blake Hebert will absolutely, in my opinion, have a shot to be in the QB1 conversation someday at Notre Dame if he stays for 4 years. Absolutely believe that. But it would take a lot this year because he's just so much further behind those other quarterbacks in those other areas. But the God-given tools are there, Trev. And they pop. I mean, they pop. Like, you watch a couple throws, you're like, that guy's got some tools, man. That guy can spin it.
100%. That was one of the first things that I said to you after yesterday's practice. I was like, yo, dude, 12's got a hose. I mean, that guy can absolutely sling it. And so it's just, to your point, a lot of technical raw ability for sure. For sure.
Yep.
Andrew Gilmore, what are your thoughts on trying out Sullivan Absher at center? Apparently, he was seen snapping the football.
If that's what they're going to do, I do not like it. And here's why I don't like it. If it's just to get through the spring, then give Max Anderson some snaps there. Like, Sullivan Absher needs an opportunity for the first time in his career to play one position and battle for a starting job. He's not going to be your starting center. He's not a center. He's 6'7" and a half, 320 plus pounds. He's not a center. His game is not that of a center, in my opinion. Now, if I'm wrong and he can snap the heck out of the ball and then snap and step and play that position and you're giving him a chance to start there, then everything I'm about to say you can throw out the window, because the whole point is he needs an opportunity to go play one position and play there. So if you're going to put him at center this spring, then he better be there every flipping day and get a chance to truly battle for that position, because that kid is too good not to get some sort of opportunity to battle for a job. But when you keep moving him around, it tells him and it tells me that you don't think he has he has a chance to be one of your top 5. And I just think it's too early for that. And I think that also you're hindering his chance to compete. Like, he's now played left tackle, right tackle, left guard, right guard, and now center. No wonder the kid can't compete for a job, because he's never been able to get comfortable anywhere. And he came from a triple option offense. He already have enough things he needed to learn. So that would be my response to that. There are other guys that you can learn to teach the snap, including Anthony Knapp when he's able to practice. Like, that tells me that also tells me, Trev, that 54 staying a tackle. It also tells me that 54 staying a tackle. So that question's answered. Could be reading too much into it, but of all the guys in their roster, I mean, I'd give Peter. By the way, I forgot to mention Peter. I always say, guys, don't ask me about certain players, because if I saw them and I would have talked about them. Yet there's one exception yesterday. Peter Jones looked really good to me yesterday. He is built like a tank. You saw him in the clip, the video I sent you. I didn't put it in, but that kid is put together really well, and he moved pretty good yesterday in drills. I'd maybe give him a shot at center, because he's a big, strong kid and moves, especially vertically. A little tight in the hips laterally, but vertically he moves really well. I forgot to mention Peter Jones yesterday. He's a really talented player as well. He's got more of a center type of body, center type of game, potentially. There's a lot of other guys I'd have given a chance to play center before I'd give Sullivan Absher a chance there. Mainly because I want Sullivan Absher to get a shot to actually stay somewhere and battle. And if somebody beats him out, they beat him out. So be it. But that's my big pushback on it. There's a reason you don't see a lot of long arm 6'7" centers. And Spencer doesn't have Sullivan doesn't have super long arms. He doesn't have the length that Gerby has and the length that Will Black has. He's not in that league. And that's why I think guard is somewhere he could play, even though he's 6'7". But center just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, Trevor.
Yeah, I'm with you. On Notre Dame's spring roster, he's listed at 6'8", 318. That would be a ridiculously big center. But I'm more with you. Just find him a home and let him compete at that place.
Yeah. Agree.
John A1, 6 of 10 scholarship defensive tackles are now listed over 300 pounds. 8 of the 10 are over 290 pounds. With the jump size, do you foresee a change in play style?
No, not really. I think that they played the way they play. They like to play the way they play. There's a reason that they have Donovan Heish in center, because that's what they want from that position. It's more just about building the body types you want more than anything else. I think that Notre Dame wants to be able to have a player or two that they can put in there to plug in certain situations. But I don't think they're looking to, recruit Davion Dixon and Sean Sevillano to just come in and be 3-4 nose tackles like Georgia did back in the day, or like Alabama did in the 2010s, where they just always had this mountain at nose tackle. And I just I don't think it'll change their play style a whole lot. I think what it does, Trevor, is allows them to be more effective in their play style. It may give them some more options against certain run teams. Like, hey, we want to, against this specific team, we're going to put 319-pound Gabriel Rubio at 3 technique, and we're going to have maybe these two big guys, Sevillano and Dixon play a little bit more, or Dawson or whatever, because this is a heavy run team, and we want to eat up gaps and let our linebackers run against a certain look. I can see that. But they still want to be an aggressive attacking team with their D-line. And their belief is, and this isn't just a guess, their belief is that by getting longer players, you have a better shot at doing that. By having guys that have some beef on them and some size on them, you have a better job of actually getting block destruction more effectively, of resetting the line in your favor than you did before, where you just had to sometimes just rely on athleticism and leverage. I don't think it's going to result in them playing a whole lot differently. I think it's going the desired result is that they're going to be able to play more effectively within the things that they want to do. So I think that's really more of where it comes from. But it's a very good observation, John. They have definitely gotten bigger.
Yeah.
A lot bigger. Yeah. You got a 340-pounder out there. You got a 320-pounder out there. He's actually not out there right now because he's injured. Davon Dixon. I mean, Jared Dawson looks a whole lot different. I mean, basically, you took Howard Cross off the roster, put Jared Dawson on the roster. Mm-hmm. One is 6'1", 285. The other one's 6'1", over 300 pounds. They're with a very different body type. And, they're definitely looking for that more beef. But beef within the framework of we still want to be able to go out there and be athletic, be aggressive, attack, reset the line in our favor, be great with block destruction. They ultimately want their D linemen to start making more plays on the football. And the bigger, longer, and stronger you are, the better chance you have of being that kind of player.
Yep. Agreed. Insured by Big. Couple questions in here. First one, what position group gives you pause and anxiety for this season? And the second question is bigger adjustment for a national championship run, first-year quarterback or new defensive coordinator?
I think it's first-year quarterback. The second one I'll answer first because I think that's an easier one for me. First-year quarterback. Maybe at other places of a new DC. The only way new DC would really impact me if I thought they were making a giant scheme overhaul, meaning like they've been a 4-2-5 team and they're moving to the 3-4, or they're moving to a more, like they were a 4-3 team and now they're going to a 3-3 stack team. Like that would give me more pause than just a new coordinator bringing in some of his own wrinkles. Like, Chris Ash, and the other thing too is you have to remember is Chris Ash in year one at Ohio State won a national championship. I mean, he didn't win it, but he was the D coordinator on an Ohio State team that won a championship that year. So we've seen him do that before. I mean, we saw several teams in recent years kind of have success in year one of a coordinator because that guy was able to kind of take them to greater heights. So first-year quarterback who you don't know how he's going to handle certain pressure situations, how he's going to act in this situation, how much of the offense can you have in with a first-year quarterback? There's all types of things that could impact the first-year quarterback, and especially in this team, this Notre Dame team specifically, more so than the new DC. And by that I mean, Trev, if all things are equal. Now, if the first-year DC does a poor job, then obviously that creates a bigger issue. But we're just saying, like, if all things are equal, like this guy plays his potential, or like what's harder to do just in theory and then specifically to this team. As long as Chris Ash is a good football coach that Marcus Freeman thinks he is, then it'll be an easier adjustment for him than it would be for a first-year starting quarterback. Because Chris Ash has called games in a national title game. I mean, Chris Ash had to design a defensive game plan designed to stop Marcus Mariota. That is not an easy task. So, yeah, that's my answer. First one. Well, any disagreement with that, Trev? You agree with me on that one?
Yeah. Yep. You and I are on the same page there.
What's your thoughts on the first one? What position group gives you pause and anxiety for this season?
So this one and my reasoning for it, mine's the offensive line, and my reason for it is not because of the talent in the room. I think that with a new starting quarterback, with Mike Denbrock going into year two, with a lot of the potential for the Notre Dame skilled players, I think a lot of the success on offense hangs in the balance of the offensive line. That position group gives me a lot of pause because State of the Union as of today, March 20th, you just don't know who's going to be where. Billy Schrauth is going to be limited this spring. Anthony Knapp's going to be limited this spring. You don't know who's going to play where. Ashton Craig is still battling back from his injury at center. And now there's talks about Sullivan Absher potentially being at center at 6'8", 320. So for me, that's some of the pause that I have. Because when I go and I break it down of what the other position groups have, I don't have any anxiety at all about the cornerbacks. None about the linebackers. None about the running backs. I have some pause about the defensive line room. But to me, a lot of their issues that they ran into last year was just pure injury. If Boubacar was healthy, I don't think I would have as many questions about edge rushers. And then you compound that with Logan Thomas another year developed, Bryce Young another year developed, Junior Tuihalamaka broke out. I'd feel a lot better about it. We just got done talking about the improvement of size along the interior defensive line. And there's already been cases of, like, we watched this D-line unit against Georgia with a maybe 60% healthy Howard Cross and no Riley Mills hold the Bulldogs to 62 yards rushing for a game. I don't know if that's going to be sustainable because obviously we know what happened against Penn State and against Ohio State. Those need adjustment, but that's not just all on the defensive line. For me, the position group that gives me the most pause and anxiety is the offensive line for a multitude of reasons. One of them I can confidently say is not because of the talent, but I think some of it is because of how much talent is in the room. It just puts me in a position where it's even more so. I hope that players get put in the right spots. I hope that players get a genuine chance to compete at the position where they have the opportunity to be the most successful. And again, I hope that players are able to come back from injury healthy enough. I have a lot of faith in Joe Otting. I think that his ceiling could be pretty high, but at center, it's still a little bit of a question mark because I would like to see Ashton Craig play for a whole season. So we have yet to see that. I haven't seen Joe Otting take a meaningful snap in college yet. And so for those reasons, for me, I'm going offensive line. What about you, Brian?
That was my position too, for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. The only thing I'll add is it's also the position where, because you're not going to have your starting five together most likely this spring, you don't quite know what your offensive line is going to look like. That's also the position where the unit needs the most work together to come together. And so that's not even it's not even a coaching issue. That's just the nature of the beast at that position.
Yep.
It's not Joe Rudolph's fault that Ashton Craig is injured and Anthony Knapp's not 100% healthy.
Yeah, facts.
It's not his fault that you need to, dang it, Joe, why did you guys play for the championship? Otherwise, Emil could have a full spring. I'll take that. Take lessen the workload for Emil Wagner because you big morons made it all the way to the national championship game, and now he can't go as much in the spring. Not going to say that. Like, it's a good thing in some ways that Emil's not playing as much this spring because you just made a run to the championship and the kid almost had 1,000 snaps. He's not the reason why Anthony Knapp is hurt. He's not the reason why Ashton Craig is hurt. So even take away all the concern, the issues that I may have or the questions that I may have, that's another thing, is like you're just not going to have your five together this spring, which means you're going to be behind the eight ball a little bit at a position which is more important for any other position, that everybody needs to be on the same page working together. So that's part of it as well.
Mm-hmm. John A1, when is the last time the Notre Dame secondary had the depth of speed and athleticism the 2025 group has?
I'd probably say 1992 would probably be my answer. Maybe 1993. I mean, you've had some teams with really good starters. I mean, 2023 had pretty flipping good starters. 2024 had pretty good flipping starters. 2018 might have been Notre Dame's best secondary prior, to this past couple seasons was, I would argue, was the best secondary that team had since 2002. And that's how good that 18 secondary was. So yeah, I just I'd have to go back to those days. So I have to go back to in 1992. You had Tom Carter, Bobby Taylor, Jeff Burris. I mean, that 1993 team was loaded. 1992 team was loaded at DB. Loaded. You have Willie Clark, John Covington. Like, actually, let me pull up the draft thing, because they had guys. You had Sean Wooden was on that team as well. Like, that team was absolutely loaded in the secondary. Let me see if I can find my 1992 Notre Dame roster here. I know I have it saved here somewhere. But yeah, that 92. I'll ask you this while I'm looking for this, Trevor. What's your answer as far as like recently? Because obviously your time and experience with this is going to be a little bit different than mine.
Secondaries as a whole is tough. 2018 is up there. I mean, as a whole, from a starter standpoint, you had Julian Love. I really like the safety duo of Jalen Elliott and Alohi Gilman in 2018. But again, I just, this depth of speed and athleticism, Julian Love, for as good of a corner as he wasn't a burner. I mean, he wasn't there's a reason why he converted to safety in the NFL. Just fits his play style better. I loved Alohi Gilman. The kid wasn't like a burner, like a true burner. He's a great safety. I mean, one of the faster corners that Notre Dame has had in recent years was Troy Pride. And now you could make the argument that they have like 3 guys in that room that can all run like that. And at the time, Troy Pride was the unicorn. He's like, man, there's just nobody. I mean, now Leonard Moore is, arguably better in coverage and just as fast, if not maybe faster. I mean, you just don't know, man. I mean, in my lifetime, there's been individuals, but this loaded of depth. We talked about it before, where in years past, I mean, you're talking about how you have Carson Hobbs waiting in the wings and everybody's excited about what kind of starter season he's going to have. And now he's going to be battling to be on the field again. And so not in my lifetime have they had this type of speed and athleticism throughout. I mean, and then you compound that with size. You start talking about the safety room. They're going 6'5", 6'4", 6'3", 6'3", 6'2", 6'2", 6 foot. I mean, that's crazy. And so for me, in my lifetime, couldn't tell you, because there's been moments. The closest is probably 18, 15 when they had Kavari Russell and Cole Luke. That was a good corner duo. But then again, like the safeties were, I mean, Elijah Shoemate was decent. Max Redfield athletically was pretty good. Those would be the only other years that I could think of where they come even close in my lifetime. Outside of that, you're digging through some of the rosters that Brian's looking at right now.
Yeah. So like I'm looking at like their 1993 depth chart, 1992 depth chart. If you go back and look at the NFL draft. So from their 92 depth chart, you had Tom Carter, who was a first-round draft pick at corner. You had Jeff Burris was a first-round draft pick at safety. Willie Clark was a third-round draft pick at corner. John Covington was a fifth-round draft pick. John Covington and Willie Clark were not full-time starters. Bobby Taylor was a second-round draft pick. Thomas Davis got drafted in the 7th round, and he was a backup. I mean, and Sean Wooden was on that team. He was a 6th-round draft pick. He was the guy that was your basically your nickel on that 93 team. So you're talking about an absolutely loaded secondary. I mean, it was Sean. I'm reading guy's name on here, Sean Wooden. But Greg, like I said, Greg Lane was a good football player. Jeff Burris, 1st-round pick. Tom Carter, 1st-round pick. John Covington was their safety. This team was absolutely loaded. LaShane Sadler, I remember Brian McGee, like that secondary was absolutely loaded in 1992. Absolutely loaded. And the 93 secondary is pretty loaded too, but 92, when you still had Tom Carter, Tom Carter, Bobby Taylor, Jeff Burris, and Bobby Taylor. That's a first, and a second, draft pick wise. And Sean Wooden would have been drafted higher if it wasn't for him tearing up his knee. So, I mean, that's a pretty loaded. I'd say that's a pretty loaded depth chart, wouldn't you, Trev? So, I mean, that's what made it unique, is that it was a bunch of guys that, Willie Clark. So actually, let me point this out. So in 1993, Willie Clark was listed on the spring depth chart as a backup corner. He was a third-round draft pick that following draft. So you had a first-round draft. So 92, Willie Clark played in 92 as well. But in 1992, you had a first-round draft pick at corner. You had a third-round draft pick at corner. You had a second-round draft pick at corner, eventually moved to safety. You had a first-round draft pick at safety. And you had a 5th-round draft pick at safety. And you had that's a loaded room right there, Trev. And you had another guy in Sean Wooden, who was a 6th-round draft pick, who, if he didn't tear his knee up, would have been drafted even higher. He's the guy that broke up that pass on Charlie Ward in 1993. The end of the game.
Okay.
Yeah. Didn't start for them that season. So, and that's what, when Brian Smith and I talk about this, we're like, somebody asked, like, when was the last time when Lou Holtz was coaching? I mean, that's the last time that they've been this deep and talented in secondary. And it's not even close. They've had some starting lineups as good as good as what this group will be. but the depth of speed and athleticism, and that's the point Trev was making, is like Julian Love was a heck of a football player. It wasn't fast. Alohi Gilman was a great football player at Notre Dame. 4'6". Jalen Elliott was an outstanding multi-year starter on a really good secondary. He ran a 4'8". I mean, it's a whole – now you got Troy Pride running a 4'4". I mean, that was one of the worst times Troy Pride ever ran. But you've got a bunch of 4'4s in this secondary. You're starting cornerback room. Christian Gray at Ohio State's camp as a rising junior ran a 4.41 and a 4.42, and he's your slowest starting cornerback. Carson Hobbs can fly, and he doesn't even start for you. Yeah. So it's been since those early 90 teams like that. And guys, I'm not being hyperbolic at all. At all. That's just how it is. Just how it is.
Yeah. I watched the defensive individual periods yesterday at practice. All of those guys can absolutely fly. Absolutely fly. It's crazy.
Yep.
Andrew Gilmore, there's a lot of excitement about Julian Sayin potentially starting for Ohio State. What young non-Notre Dame quarterback are you looking forward to seeing this year?
Well, Sayin's one. You know, I've said before, Trev, I've talked a lot about Alabama and how important this year is. I mean, excuse me, not Julian Sayin, but Ty Simpson and Austin Mack. I've talked about them at Alabama. Obviously, Julian Sayin's one. But their season's going to depend on who wins that quarterback job and how well does that guy play. Is it the coach's kid in Austin and Ty Simpson, or is it the young kid in Austin Mack, who I think's got a lot of ability? So he'd be one. I've talked about this. If I'm a Boston College fan, I am crossing my fingers and praying that Dylan Lonergan wins that starting job. I think he's a talented kid. Man, DJ Lagway is super talented. I wish he was healthier in the spring, but man, I can't wait to see him play this fall. He's a really talented quarterback. Just looking for some other, some other young quarterbacks I'm looking for. I'm just kind of going through the season, other teams.
Yeah, I've got a couple. I mean, Ricky Collins, I'm excited to see if he wins the starting job at Syracuse. Especially after what Kyle McCord did with that offense last year. Dante Moore at Oregon. I think it's going to be interesting to see what Dan Lanning is going to do with a quarterback that isn't like a fifth-year senior. So I think that'll be fun. And then, of course, I mean, I know he's getting a lot of attention, drawing a lot of hype, but I am excited to see what Arch Manning does at Texas. That's going to be a lot of fun. I'm trying to think of what are some of the other younger quarterbacks. See if Aiden Childs at Michigan State takes another step.
Love that kid. You know he's on my list, Trev. You know I love that kid. Definitely looking forward to seeing what he could do. I guess he's kind of still young, but can Avery Johnson take a leap this year at Kansas State? I mean, he's second year as a starter. It's crazy. He's a junior already. Man, that makes me feel really old. It makes me feel really old. But Washington has a really kind of a short, dynamic run throw guy that people think might start for them this year, Damon Williams. Does he win that starting job? And then how does their offense look? Because he's a different kind of cat, man. They put him in there last year at times just to run. So how does he handle the job? That's another one that I'm very curious to see. But those are some guys just kind of that just pop off. I'm trying to go through some different depth charts and see if there's any teams that pop out to me as potential starters this year. I'm curious to see how Devin Brown's going to do at Cal. I'm not excited to see, looking forward to seeing him. It's more of a, I wonder how that's going to go for them.
Yeah.
I mean, if you like big name guys, Jackson Arnold's one, but my stance on Jackson Arnold. I'm not the biggest Jackson Arnold fan in the world, Trev, but those are some of the guys, man. Yeah. Those are some of the guys I'm looking for. Can Iowa finally get a quarterback? That's a legitimate question. You know what I mean? Are they ever going to finally have a quarterback? Could you imagine how good Iowa would be if they ever actually got a real quarterback? That would be very interesting. I mean, and look, I am looking forward to seeing Bryce Underwood this year. I don't know that he'll start the opener, but he's going to start at some point in time. And he gets a lot of this generational quarterback hype, and I think all that's people said that about Quinn Ewers, highest graded quarterback ever. It's three of the four highest graded quarterback recruits ever from like the last 5 years.
I was about to say there's a generational quarterback every
right,
single
like
year,
every year now. Yeah,
which I think
right,
people don't understand the term
right.
generational.
Yes,
but
yes, exactly. But he's still really good and really talented. I don't particularly like his antics kind of annoy me, and like I'm trying to be a mini Mahomes, but Dylan Raiola is still a really talented quarterback.
yeah.
I don't think he's as good as some people make it out to be. My guy Kenny Moore and I used to kind of have this back and forth. I think CJ Carr's a better quarterback than Dylan Raiola. I still think that's true, but Dylan Raiola is still really good. And how much maturity he can show as a football player is going to have a big impact on whether or not Nebraska can kind of make that jump this year. So he's a guy that I'm looking forward to seeing this year and seeing kind of how he can step up and how he can kind of grow his game this year, Trev. That's definitely one that I've got my eye on. No question about it. And there's a guy, the Luke Cromenholt kid that transferred to Mississippi State.
Yeah.
I think he's a really good fit for Jeff Lebby's offense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very curious. And he's got a battle for the starting job. I mean, he's got to beat out, Blake Shapen, who's a Baylor transfer, but he's a talented quarterback. And I'm very curious with him. I'm very curious to see how did he handle the rough patches from last year?
Yeah.
Like, is he going to bounce through it and does it make him better, or does it kind of, he never recovers from it? And here's a name to keep an eye on, Big Ten fans. Justin Martin at Maryland. He's a UCLA transfer. He was originally committed to Cal, went to UCLA. This kid has a big arm, big time arm. He transferred from UCLA, very inexperienced. I believe he played at Maryland last year, so he's not like a first-year transfer. He's a junior now, but he's a young quarterback, Trev, that I've got my eye on to see if he can kind of make a jump this year. He's very talented. He was just really raw. And so that's going to be a bit of a question for me is kind of what kind of players is he going to be? But actually, did he play for them last year? No, he didn't play. Where did Justin Martin play last year? Was it at UCLA? I thought he was at Maryland last. No, he was at UCLA last year. So yeah, he was at UCLA last year. Went 24 of 35 for 179 yards and a touchdown. And like he's a really talented player. If they can figure out a way to get him going in that offense, he's a very talented kid. Very talented kid. And I'm curious to see kind of how he performs this year. I thought he was there. Oh, you know who I'm thinking of? The transfer that was there last year was the MJ Morris kid. That's who I was thinking of. That's who transferred to Maryland last year. And he probably shouldn't have, because he probably would have been the starting quarterback at NC State. But he transferred to he left, went to Maryland, got beat out, and then jumped in the portal again this year. So grass isn't always greener on the other side. Some of these kids are going to have to learn.
Yeah.
But those are just some, just kind of quickly scouring through the depth charts for this past couple years. But those are a couple guys. Here's another guy. Where'd Ja'Curry Brown end up? UCF. Okay. That's an interesting kid. If he's still at UCF, because he's not much of a passer, but he's a real dynamic runner. So, and then, like how does Thomas Castellanos do in, he's reunited with Gus Malzahn. Mitch Mustaine was his quarterback. But how does he do with now that he's reunited with Gus Malzahn? Because he played at UCF as a freshman a little bit, and he got recruited by Gus Malzahn to UCF. So that's another one that I'm looking forward to. Yeah. And Archer, I didn't say he was a starter at Maryland last year. I just thought he was on the team last year. I know that the Edwards kid was Maryland's starter last year, but I thought Martin was on the team, but he was with UCLA. But I was thinking of MJ Morris is what I was thinking of. That was the transfer that played at Maryland last year and got beat out for the starting job. But yeah, so there you go. It's an interesting one. Very interesting one. Let's go here to Andrew Gilmore. Let's look at this one.
Who is a better college football coach, Pete Carroll or Urban Meyer?
I'd have to go with Urban Meyer was better just because he won more and it did at different places. If I had to pick between the two, I'd go with Pete Carroll. Because I think Urban Meyer's one of those, like he's one of those guys that the light shines very bright for a period of time, and then he wears out. He wears out and he wears you out. I mean, they had a great run from like 06 to 09 at Florida, and then just fell off the face of the earth. Ohio State, like they had that great run, but then he does this, he does that, and this problem creates a lot of issues. And even though they were still winning, it's kind of done. Did a great job of Bowling Green. So, I mean, if you brought Urban Meyer in, you were probably going to win a national championship. Pete Carroll obviously had success as well, but I mean, Pete Carroll's the guy you hire and he's your head coach for a decade. Urban's not. It's like, I mean, that's kind of the challenge you'd have if you're going to hire one of the two of them. But as much as I dislike them, you can't argue with Urban's results. I mean, they speak for themselves.
Yeah, Urban was going to be mine too. Winning at multiple places. Yeah. Yep.
Urban I mean, he just won more. I mean, Pete Carroll won what? One outright championship. He won that the partial in 03, but they won the AP in 03 and 04, and they just won the coaches in 04. They won everything in 04. But I mean that I'll say this, that 03 to 05 USC run was as good as anything Urban ever did in a 3-year period, just as quality your team. But sure. I mean, Urban won more titles. Urban won a title in 06 to 08. I would take those 03 to 05 USC teams. I think would beat the 06 to 08 Florida teams. But those 06 to 08 Florida teams won 2 national championships at a time when Pete's program was still good. You just can't deny that. And then of course he went and won another title at Ohio State. Just you can't deny that. I don't like him, but that's kind of where it is.
Jacob Loudenslager, what number practice is the next one that you guys will be able to watch?
That's a really good one. Now, you did a really good job with that one, Trevor. I don't know that I would have gotten that one as good. Let me go here. The next one we'll be able to watch is next Wednesday, and it looks like that will be practice number 4 or 5. Because not all the practices are listed on what they gave us. So it'll either be 4 or 5. I think it'll be 4. That'll be the next one that we have access to. It'll be next Wednesday. So
there you go.
Yep. I'm looking forward to it, Jacob. You're getting me, like I'm trying to be calm and not think about it, but you're bringing it up, Jacob, and making me think about it. Next is the salty bomb. The rest of these are the salty bomb.
All right. Sounds good. Salty Virginia peanuts. What do you foresee for Logan Thomas in terms of development this spring?
The big thing for me with Logan Thomas is I was a little floored by his weight loss. I mean, he was a 224-pound kid a year ago who's now down to 213. That's problematic for me.
Yeah.
That's concerning. But what do I want to see from his development is I want to see a guy that's stronger and a guy that's more than just a really good athlete. I want to see a guy that actually can go out there and, technically and fundamentally improve and win at the point of attack, not just win because you're really athletic. So it's just about refining as a player. And then the other one's going to be, is he going to be strong enough to hold up on an everyday basis? That's a legitimate question for an edge player that's 213 pounds. At least that's what he's listed as. So that's a bit of a concern for me. I'm not going to lie to you, but I just want to see a guy that can be an impact edge rusher. That's what I want to see from Logan. I mean, look, last play of the game against Georgia, they had him on the field rushing the quarterback. I mean, the kid's got ability. It's just, can he just win more at the point of attack, and can he do more than just rush the passer? That's going to come down to that strength and technical prowess, Trev.
Yeah, I agree. The weight loss was shocking to see.
Yeah,
definitely shocking to see. Who has the higher ceiling, Drake Bowen or Kingston?
They're very similar. I gave them both 5-star upside grades. They're different players. Drake is a little bit more, of a pure mic. I think that Kingston's a little bit more versatile in what he can do. Kingston's a little bit more natural in coverage. Drake is learning to be better in coverage. I think Kingston has a little bit more better pass rusher. I think Drake is more of a force against the run, just a legitimate step up force against the run. Both of them are smart. Both of them are leaders. I mean, it's splitting hairs, man. I mean, they're both outstanding. If they both hit their ceiling at the same time, you're going to have the best linebacker room in college. I mean, you're going to have the best 1-2 punch at linebacker in college football, and it won't be all that close. I mean, that's how good they both are, in my opinion. So whose ceiling is higher? Similar. Very similar. Like to the point where I'm like, I don't even care to go through the process of trying to do point by point of who's better at this, who's better at that. They both have different strengths. They both have different weaknesses. I didn't even say weaknesses. They both have areas where they're not quite as good as the other, I guess is a better way of saying it. They're both outstanding football players. Outstanding football players.
Agreed. How do Mike McGlinchey and Charles Jagusah compare in terms of how they play the game and dominance?
Similar. I mean, Charles is bigger than Mike. I mean, he's 15 pounds bigger than Mike. Mike is a skosh taller. Mike was more technically proficient than Charles was. Charles is a little bit more athletic than Mike is laterally. Neither of them are elite athletes, but I think Charles has better feet and better athleticism, more beef to him. I think Mike was really powerful at the point of attack. I think Charles has a little bit more potential there. I think Mike was more comfortable in space right now than Charles is by a little bit, not by a ton, but by a little bit. So they're not that different. I just think Charles overall is just bigger, stronger, and more powerful at the same age than what Mike was. I mean, he's bigger now than what Mike was as a fifth-year senior by over 10 pounds.
Yeah.
So he's just a big, big boy. Really, Mike had really nimble feet. He didn't have great lateral quickness, but he had really nimble feet. Charles is not quite as nimble as what Mike was at that same age. But like you watch Mike in the NFL, I watched him a little bit, and he'll get tossed because he's just not a naturally. I've said this about Mike McGlinchey. When Mike McGlinchey retires from the NFL, he'll be down to like 250 like that. I mean, real quick.
Yeah.
You'll see him in a business suit somewhere, and you're like, who's that dude? That's a former NFL offensive lineman. Are you sure it's not a former, like, small forward? Like, that guy's kind of skinny to be a former, and you know what I mean? Like, that's going to be Mike McGlinchey. Where Charles is just naturally big. He's like Quentin. He's just naturally massive. That's another little bit of a difference between the two.
Would Billy Schrouth and Charles Jagusah be the best left guard, left tackle tandem for the Irish this year?
No. If everything pans out the way that I hope, a perfect world scenario, I still say the starting left tackle is Emil Wagner or Gerby Lambert. Like, I think your perfect world scenario is you've got Jagusah, Emil, and Lambert in starting lineup at the same time. And then Charles would end up being a guard. And then you have Billy at guard and Emil Wagner like at left and Gerby at right, or vice versa. That to me is still your best. And part of me is like, I kind of like the idea of Emil at left tackle because I want to have 334-pound Gerby Lambert at right tackle and or right guard, and then 330-pound Charles Jagusah at right tackle or right guard, kind of having them big boys playing next to each other. Like, that's my power side. Now, if that's on my left side, then hey, let's roll, son. But I think that would be, it's like you said, the best. It's most likely of the best options. That's the most likely of the best options. Even though I still think that they're going to move Knapp there, but that's not, to me, the best option.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yep.
Zerk Knight said, have you seen Joe Thomas lately? Talk about a huge physical change. But like Joe Thomas and Mike McGlinchey are very similar. Like Joe Thomas had to work to keep that weight on and just naturally he stopped playing and the weight comes off. Zerk Knight, that's a good example of what I think Mike McGlinchey is going to look like. I think that weight's going to come off him in a hurry. He's going to look a lot different. So yeah, that's a good example of what I'm referring to.
Same thing happened with Taylor Lewan. Taylor Lewan was a left tackle, and he since he stopped playing in the NFL. I mean, dude slimmed down. He's like 225.
Wow.
Yeah.
He stopped playing like within the last couple of years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay, let me just see here. Oh, here we go.
Is there any benefit to not announcing who will be quarterback one for some period of time once you know who it will be?
I don't think so. I really don't. I think coaches get too much into this mind game stuff with the opponent. Like, we're going to not say who it is. Like, the fact that all three, like, the only time that really matters to me is if you have two quarterbacks who are very different. So, like, I'm either going to start, I'm trying to just, my two options of quarterback are Thomas Castellanos or Jack Cohn. Oh, like, okay, I'm not going to announce which one that, because they're two very different offenses that we're going to have. But outside of some crazy dichotomy like that, it doesn't matter. Your offense is your offense. Mike Denbrock's going to call what Mike Denbrock's going to call. And Marcus Freeman has said they're not different. They're all going to run the same offense. I think the benefit is you could maybe keep guys invested longer, but I always think that knowing who your quarterback is more important and than playing mind games with your opponent. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't name your starter and then not tell anyone about it. But in today's age, especially as many people at Notre Dame that like to talk to the media, which I don't have a problem with, I'm glad that they do. But the odds of that not getting out, and not even just Notre Dame, I'm not talking about staff, I'm talking about parents and players, it's going to get out. You know, some kid who's like, my roommate is so-and-so starting such and such, and he told me that, you know, that so-and-so is taking every first-team rep the last 2 weeks. That's going to get out. You know, that's the other thing that I laugh, and he goes like, we're going to keep this a secret. Okay. Good luck with that. You having every player in your team, like, you know, take lie detector tests on whether or not they told anyone in the dorm room that so-and-so is going to be your starting quarterback. You have good luck with that. I want my team to know who their quarterback is. At the end of the day, that's all let your team know as early as possible who your guy is. Outside of that, I don't care when you tell us or when you tell anybody else, just as long as the team knows. That's what matters to me.
Is Devin Houston's move to the offensive line a good thing for him or a signal that he should plan to transfer?
Well, I think if it was going to be a signal that he should transfer, it would have already happened. He would have jumped in. I mean, I'm under the impression from what I was told back then that Devin Houston was one of two defensive linemen that were kind of told, I don't think you can play for us here at this position. So instead of jumping in the portal, Devin moved to the offensive line. I think Devin wants to get his degree from Notre Dame, and he wants a chance to play. He wasn't going to do that at defensive tackle. Right or wrong, he wasn't going to get that shot. I think what this does is it gives him a chance to play. Devin's a pretty good offensive lineman in high school. He's got an offensive line body. You'll put him at center, put him at guard. Maybe he could be your center. Maybe he could be that guy that does that. Who knows? You know, but I think this is more about Devin saying, hey, I want to help the team, and where's the best way I could do that? And maybe it's there. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I kind of like the idea of him still helping out on scout team on the D line. I think the kid just wants a shot to play. And he may look at it like, even if I'm not going to play here at Notre Dame, when I do transfer, maybe my best option is to transfer somewhere, play on the offensive line. That also could be it. So,
Fair enough.
Yeah. Well, Trevor, my man, that's going to do it for today's show. Why don't you go ahead and take us out of here?
Yeah, you got it. Well, listen, guys, great show today. Really good mailbag submissions. Bryan and I are going to continue cranking out content and doing shows about Notre Dame spring practice because, like we alluded to today, it's exciting. It's a lot of fun to talk about. And it kind of scratches that itch until we do get into the full swing of fall camp and into the season. Before you guys head out of here, please be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. Anybody else that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do, whatever platform you watch us on, whether it's Spotify podcasts or Apple podcasts, any one of those outlets, please be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We'd greatly appreciate it. And as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. You see it scrolling down there at the bottom of the screen. Bryan and I will be back tomorrow, and it is Friday. And you know what that means. It's going to be the Friday free-for-all mailbag. Well, you guys will get to dictate the topics of conversation that we had. So pretty much what we did this last hour is what we're going to be doing for the entire show tomorrow.
All day.
Oh, yeah. So make sure that you bring really good topics of conversation. Bryan and I'll be here to answer any and all questions, comments, concerns that you guys have. And now that it's the offseason, a lot of it, we still want it to be geared towards Notre Dame, college football, but we've answered the occasional movie and food question the last
Friday free-for-all gives you more opportunity to ask those questions and have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we have the Friday free-for-all. Monday to Thursday, we like to try to keep it about football, Notre Dame football, and that type of thing. So, yeah, so that's what we'll do. So for Trevor, I'm Bryan. You all have an awesome rest of your week. Trevor, you got back to your lighted room today. That was good. No more Godfather jokes about you today. So appreciate that. Have an awesome day, everybody. We'll talk to you guys again very soon. John A1 just upgraded to the Gold Club, by the way. Also, John, special shout out to you, man. I appreciate you very much. Everybody have an awesome day. Talk to y'all again very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.